Services Committee, a meeting February 13, 2020. I would like to acknowledge that we are, in fact, holding this meeting on the lands of the Coast Salish people. Approval of the agenda. Director Frost, absolutely.
So I'd like to amend the agenda to discuss the curling rink under new business, the Parksville curling rink.
Very good, thank you. I think that's a friendly, so approval of the agenda as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you. Sorry?
Who was first and who was second?
Well, first was,
Adam.
I don't pay attention actually who's doing first and second, I'm sorry.
Mark me down as second.
Thank you.
Mayor seconded it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Adoption of the minutes. Thank you. Seconded. Director Rogers. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Delegations. I think we have 5 minutes, don't we?
Yeah.
First one is Mayor Sherry Minions. Is she here?
I don't see it.
Your minions sends her regrets, so
Yeah. A brief introduction would be good then, and we try to keep these within around the 5-minute mark if we can.
it shouldn't take us more than half an hour, don't worry.
Perfect. I knew you'd help me out. Thank you very much.
My name is Ron Paulson. I'm a city councillor with the city of Port Alberni, and with me I have Director Willa Thorpe. She's the director of our Parks, Recreation, and Heritage Department in Port Alberni, and we wanted to come and have a little chat with you all today about our experience in the winter, and thank Parksville and the area for being great neighbors to the city of Port Alberni through our little dilemma. And I'll let Willa kind of lead in and go from there. Maybe
Thank you.
Just give a little backgrounder on our dilemma that we went through. And
Yeah, so in April of 2019, we purchased a brand new chiller for our ice plant to run at our ice arena there. Beautiful brand new unit that lasted about 20 weeks, and then we had a failure of this new unit, and so our ice was down approximately 3 weeks in Port Alberni, and so everything came to a complete standstill. And so we have our BC Junior Hockey Club, we've got figure skating, we have minor hockey, we have the entire community, of course, looking to us for this community hub, which was unavailable. And so Parksville was able to step up, and it was very much appreciated that you would open your doors to. We got images of minor hockey teams reaching out to us saying, come and share our ice with us. And so the fact that your community with open arms would support our Bulldogs Hockey Club as well as our minor hockey is unprecedented. And so we wanted to come and say thank you, and of course extend, heaven forbid if you should ever be in a similar situation to Port Alberni, we would more than welcome to share our facilities as well.
just, you never know how important something is to a community until you're without it. And certainly our multiplex is a huge part of the social equity that a community has. And I always say about the Junior A hockey team that got to host a game here in Parksville. And by the way, it was packed. It was a packed arena that night, and it was loud and proud. Lots of young people there, but where else, I always say, where else 28 times a year can we gather close to 10% of our population under one roof on a social evening, whether it be a Friday night or a Saturday night? And so I call it social equity, and you don't know how much you miss it until you're without it. And the multiplex is certainly a big piece of our infrastructure. So I think on behalf of the City of Port Alberni, I just want to say thank you to the regional district in Nanaimo and the people of Parksville for stepping to the plate, helping us out in a pretty tough time. It was pretty devastating. An ammonia leak is not something that you obviously take lightly. And you know, our Bulldogs team, our junior A team that represents our community throughout the province of British Columbia, spent many days practicing here, and also you hosted the game here. And I was involved with Parks and Recreation for 10 years at our multiplex, and I realized how difficult it is to juggle a set schedule in the middle of the winter. So anyway, just on behalf of the citizens of Port Alberni and our Parks and Recreation Department, I want to thank you all so much for stepping to the plate and helping us out in that time of need. And having said that, we brought a little memento to remind you, and it's not a competitor because we're in a different league. So, yeah, you know, if this was the Nanaimo Buccaneers, it'd probably just kind of wind up under somebody's desk. But, we would like to present you with this Bulldogs jersey. This is their road and travel jersey. We would like to present this to you as a thank you. And I could have...
You would like to join me?
Oh,
Actually,
come on, don't be shy.
I was with you until that crack about the Nanaimo.
They're easy to.
very good. Thank you very much. You know what? That's what we do, right? That's what we do. We look after each other, especially on the island. I find that over and over again. Mr. Burden. Kim? There he is. Welcome, sir.
Wow. I think I'm in kindergarten. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present the latest in a series of programs that the Parksville District Chamber of Commerce has undertaken to advance business growth in the region. You got that?
Yep.
Okay. So most of you have heard me before. I think that I've made presentations at least on an annual and probably a semi-annual basis with regard to encouraging businesses in our community to grow, encouraging businesses to come to our community to be established. We started back in 2009 with the formation of Oceanside Initiatives, which was an assembly of all of the business organizations in the region, all of the local government representatives, both First Nations, School District 69 and Vancouver Island University. And together we completed a competitive assessment of the Oceanside region. We developed guys of Oceanside Initiatives. And just recently, we signed a memorandum of understanding with all of the business organizations in the region, and we have reached out to both First Nations to sign on, and to date, the Snaneas have indicated a willingness to do that, and I'm in conversation with Qualicum. So, The goal is to take all of those previous works and pull something together. And so this year we were fortunate, after the disappointment of the rural dividend funding disappearing, we were fortunate to be able to pull together some funding through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction in the form of a job creation plan. And again, we were extraordinarily fortunate to hire Corey Hostetter, who is heading up this new project, which she is going to describe to you in detail. And we're not here to ask you for money. We're here to provide you with information and to reiterate our invitation that was sent out last week to invite you to the grand opening of the new Oceanside Initiatives office on February the 20th. So.
Thanks, Kim. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'm honored to be here and to have been chosen to carry out this project for the Oceanside area, as well as having the warm welcome that I've received from the business community. We bring this presentation to you first respectfully as you represent the region we are planning to service. As you've just heard from Kim, much of the groundwork for this project has been laid over several years. The partners have now formally come together, and it's time to put the plan into action. By using the collective vision of our business community partners to guide us, the plan will focus on programs and projects that give businesses the tools they need to expand, develop, and succeed. And by doing so, we harness the potential of the current business climate, as well as honor our community's values of innovation, creativity, and respect for the environment. The business community partners were clear in what they wanted. The actions must align with other stakeholders in the community if we want buy-in. The formal structure must take place so that the core priorities, such as cohesive regional collaboration, regional diversity and relevance, as well as business retention and expansion strategies, can be developed, implemented, and measured through a set of milestones. The business community partners have been busy moving this plan along. By signing the Memorandum of Understanding in November, they created a structure needed to represent the communities of Oceanside. And now, thanks to the Job Creations Project awarded to Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce in January, it was possible to open up Oceanside initiatives at 174 East Island Highway. We've hired 4 full-time staff, an administrator, a data specialist, a business retention and expansion specialist, and a project manager. That's me. We will also create a supportive business hub and incubator, which will foster economic culture that promotes innovation through collaboration and creative thinking. Our new office has space for our collaborators and room to incubate up to 2 businesses, and we feel confident that our space will be at capacity before spring. And it's our intent to plan for a new funding and sustainability model for the future. So as you can see, about over $100,000 has been spent so far trying to pull this together, and the funds so far have come from various grants from federal government, the provincial government, the RDN, and ICE-T. And without these partners, we'd not been able to come this far. So on behalf of those partners and stakeholders, we want to show our sincere appreciation to these investors by creating an organization that adds value to the region's prosperity. So we look forward to updating you in the months to come on our progress and contributions to business growth in Oceanside. You'll be receiving an invitation shortly to participate in a stakeholder advisory group, which will provide input into planned projects, monitor the milestones and progress along the way, and bring back information to the respective organization each member represents. Thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I did get your email, just so you know. I've been away for a couple days, so I will get back to you shortly. Any questions? Director Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would just like you to give me a couple examples of the projects that you have in mind.
Sure. Kim, are you okay with me answering?
Yep, you go
okay.
ahead.
Potential projects, we're still in the works of doing that, but potential projects would be company visits and information and support that we could give to businesses, support for startups, data statistics collection and sharing, training opportunities for businesses, and mentorship programs. That's just a top of the list thing. There's other projects that may come about when we're planning.
And if I can add, there's a lot of information about our community in various places that people who are coming to the community want to see in terms of land available, commercial space available, those kinds of things. And part of this is to get all of that information compiled together and make sure that it's accurate.
Any further questions or comments? Please do.
Thank you. And then, so just a follow-up. So when you talk about training opportunities for people, is that how you're utilizing the grant dollars from the ministry? Okay.
Yeah, there's a training component with 3 of the employees. So one of them we have registered to actually at a university level course to teach the development of business attraction and retention projects. And the others will be doing some in-house training with regard to website updating, data collection, and those sorts of things. And making sure that those 3 folks have better job skills than they had when they joined us, so that when this particular phase of the project is over, they're going to be more job ready than they were when they came in.
Go ahead. Director Rogers.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Kim and Corey. Some of your presentations, and I know some from past discussions, you're looking at one thing to really concentrating on is sort of the opportunities for existing businesses within the area to expand, succeed, and also try to help them have the capacity to stay here and work and operate within the Oceanside area. And I just, so this group, you've got the Qualicum Chamber of Commerce, the Parksville Chamber of Commerce, and you've also got the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association and so on. As you move forward, how are you going to be incorporating input from all the groups into that and from the business? And if we take a look at Parksville Downtown Business Association and so on, just trying to see what sort of vision that you see for the part that the regional district might play in support of this.
So my vision is to have all the local governments participate, both First Nations groups participating, school district, VIU, all of the business organizations, to be part of that stakeholder advisory group, probably meeting quarterly and providing input into the various projects that we're looking to implement, and making sure that the milestones are met, being a monitoring group.
Thank you.
Director Salter.
Am I not on? Okay. Oh, what's that? Are you going to be working in conjunction with the Job Initiatives Program downtown that also works with, through the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, to help folks actually find employment and skills and training and so on? Will you be working with them, or are these going to be separate entities? Would you be working?
We're going to be working with them in terms of them monitoring our contract with the ministry. But in terms of them participating, this is more focused on business growth rather than, and obviously part of business growth is finding people employment and growing the employment base and growing the tax base and all of those things. But in terms of actually working with them participating as part of the project, no.
So they won't be stakeholders working with you then?
No, their mandate is different.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Four point three, this is Kevin Elder and company. Welcome, Kevin, good to see you again. We're gonna try to keep this like under 10, I'm hoping. Eh?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
We were going to squeeze to 5.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping, thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thanks to the committee, and through the committee, thank you to the RDN board and all of the people that you represent for what we believe is an ongoing interest community-wide in supporting the renewal of what we're calling the Oceanside track at Bolinas, to remind people that it's truly a community initiative. We're here, there are 4 of us who will speak as briefly as we can today. Myself as Superintendent of Schools for School District 69, our District Secretary Treasurer Ron Amos, General Manager of Operations Chris Dempster, and committee member and student representative and Oceanside Track and Field Representative Juliet DeVoe. They are in the front row behind me. We are hoping to provide the committee, and through the committee, the board, with the clarity that we think will support the board and the district board in considering the request for financial support in regard to the renewal of the Bolinas track, and also for support in general for the community-wide dialogue around the importance in terms of community benefit, health of citizens, in addition to benefits for those who are competitive users of the track eventually when it's replaced and renewed, so that we can all be on the same page in regard to the importance of and the benefits of and the potential for this project. We represent, as presenters today, the fundraising committee of the Oceanside Track Renewal Steering Committee. You'll see, and you have the notes, you have this presentation, so there's a lot of material in it, and we know that we'll just touch on it, and you can ask questions and take this information back for deliberation beyond the committee as well as within the committee. The steering committee has a representation from the entities noted. About half of the 18 members are in the room today, including Mayor Main. Thank you for representing the RDN board. Hannah King, thank you for representing the staff of the RDN. Trustee Elaine Young, and I'm not turning around to point at them. I'm hoping they're giving some sort of signal that they're here. Kim Burden is on the steering committee, and representing the Oceanside Track and Field community, Kim and Randy Longmire and Jane Waite. There may be others in the room that I haven't acknowledged as being members of the committee, but there are 18 of us. We gather regularly to further the cause and to plan as we can. You will know that the track is located at Bolinas Secondary, but we are considering this to be a community resource. So at the steering committee level, we came to the conclusion that we should refer to it as the Oceanside Track Renewal for the track at Bolinas, which looks a bit more like this close-up. As you know, what you can't see in that view is how much grass there is on it. But what you can see in the video that we'll show momentarily is what the track and field group has done to demonstrate that in a very, I think, cute way. So I think you know the well-known history of the track, and it comes from back in 1977. It's been the subject of many studies over the years, and we believe there is a community-wide consensus around the need to, the benefits of renewing the track. Sorry if you can't hear it well, but it's mostly about the visuals. If you can't hear that, that's reference to the Alberni track as a competitive track and as a walking facility. These are comments about the number of Masters athletes from this area. And of course, those are the youngsters. Now, the vision for the project, as you can imagine and may have heard and will probably believe yourselves, is for a track that can provide services for all community members at a high level. So the commitment from the steering committee and the commitment through board motion in this room in December is to move toward a competitive level 8-lane rubberized track. The costs, which Mr. Amos will refer to in a moment, will approach the $2 million mark. We believe if we can secure those funds this year, we'll be complete next year, being 2021. We're aiming for fully accessible facilities for lighting to be able to be installed later, but not within the $2 million project. Preparation for temporary bleachers in the future. We see it as a regional amenity used by 4,200 students and all 30,000 people of the Oceanside region. We've talked quite a bit at the committee level about measurable health benefits for citizens, and of course it would be bookable for future competitions, including in partnership with any other tracks that might be built in the region as an ancillary space, should it be partnered with a larger multiplex kind of facility with the track as well. We would be pursuing a joint use partnership with the RDN in terms of booking and partnerships around ongoing maintenance and so on. Sorry to rush through this, but you have the detail in front of you as well, and we're certainly open to any questions. The Board of Education's commitment is to provide the land at no charge in perpetuity. Create the steering committee looking for a joint use agreement and pass these two motions in December to support the track as an 8-lane competition track and to request $500,000 from the community through the RDN and through the RDN all of the different regions, the township and the town and the city. The specifications for the track, Mr. Dempster, as General Manager of Operations, has more insights into that, and his 44 seconds start now.
I shouldn't take that long. So basically, it's an 8-lane track, and you'll see by the diagram that we're going to have excavate and refill different areas of the site. So we're going to be excavating this end here and then filling this end. So we have to stabilize the track. So there's over a meter difference in height on the track. So we're going to accomplish that by obviously removal and infill through the track. That's the starting process. So it's a 400-meter 8-lane track with an 8-lane sprint section, and that's about my presentation. 44 seconds.
There are more specs, obviously, to talk about, and Chris is available to answer questions later as well. In terms of the financing of the project, Secretary-Treasurer Ron Amos is leading the subcommittee, and there's been some extensive and I think some creative thinking around not just what it's going to cost, but where we might be able to find the funds. Mr. Amos?
So yeah, I'm not going to elaborate on exactly what the 1.7 is. You're kind of getting a sense of what's embedded in that. But again, why the 1.7 and the request for 2 million, obviously, is recognizing escalation in the project, recognizing that we can put some money aside for future replacement, repair kind of thing.
Excuse me. Let me pause for you to come up to the mic. Tough for us to hear you back here.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, so obviously recognizing the differential between the 1.7 and the 2 million that we're asking for is basically embedding in there for the escalation of the project that naturally happens, as well as if there's any funds left over, it will start or kickstart the surpluses needed to reinvigorate in a matter of years when it comes to having to re-rubberize the track kind of thing. But again, that'll all be dealt with through the mechanism of the joint use agreement and that kind of stuff. But what the estimate does include, obviously, is literally leveling the field. So part of the field is kind of at a 1% pitch kind of thing, and so a bit of an escalation factor in order to level this field and to make it a regulation field and to put the 8 lanes in there. There's some additional work that we have to do, and so part of that is the curbing and drainage to accommodate the runoff with the pitch of the track kind of thing. There's retaining walls to be embedded in this. There's a paved accessibility path that's embedded in this cost. There's conduits for future electrical circumstances, potentially for lighting, for future lighting. What it doesn't include naturally, and these are just based on questions that we've been asked by the public, it doesn't include a washroom facilities. It doesn't include parking. We've got some ideas, but again, the cost right now doesn't include that, and the cost doesn't include the actual lighting itself. That conversation can come later as we consider the uses of this thing. But again, there would be conduits to run for the lighting for future work. So that's the cost element. So moving on to the fundraising component. So again, as Dr. Elder alluded to, the committee itself is made up of many community partners. The fundraising committee is 6 members of the committee kind of thing, as a focus group of recognizing the need for how are we going to get these funds. So the bulk of the funds, if you want, is the recognized need for partnerships with local governments. And again, the rationale for that, so the school districts have put in $200,000 to kickstart this. But the partnership with the local governments is all about needing those primary donors in order for us to apply out to other grants. Because there's, in many of these grants that I can kind of articulate a little bit later, is all about the matching grants. And so they oftentimes, when you apply for these grants, they want to see that they are not the sole donor. So it's all about the local municipal partners making the upfront contributions so that we can go further into the grant process for that matching principle. The other things we're looking at are obviously recognizing that there may be public wanting to make contributions, and that might be service clubs and that kind of stuff making contributions. And likewise, we're sort of entertaining or considering ways that there can be sponsorships on the track, whether it's posters during events or anything like that. Again, all of it is about trying to raise awareness, trying to raise as breadth, if you want, of donor possibilities kind of thing, but recognizing that the bulk of it will start with the initial donor or local government contributions.
Thank you, Ron. Questions at the end as well for any of us. And at this point, I just want to remind the committee, and through the committee, the board, that the Board of Education in kickstarting this campaign with $200,000, as was pointed out when our board met with Qualicum Council last week, recently. That represents fully half of the discretionary capital funding that the school district has. So it's a significant commitment on the part of the school district in terms of time, energy, property, and money. And we are hoping for the same the same amount of energy and excitement and some support, significant support financially to match that. We are quite aware that there's a lot of detail to sort out in regard to what that might mean if the RDN were to be in support of this. But we decided to go this route rather than to individual entities, to one council, to another council, to the RDN board, because the entire region, including those councils, has representation at the RDN. So thus the request to the RDN is representing the entire community, including the city and the town. And we hope that this provides the kind of information that the board might need, and we would be happy to engage in any conversation at any time, any of us, to support further conversation at the board level. And Juliet will join me and just close on the theme of Let's Dare to Dream.
Thank you all so much for having us today. My name's Juliet, and I'm an elite sprinter at Bolinas, and I also train with Mid-Island Distance, and I'm also a coach with Oceanside Track and Field. So I've spent a lot of time in the track community, and I can tell you that a track would be so beneficial for our community, for every single person, not just for young people, but looking forward to the future for the seniors. And our goal is to make it an accessible facility for everyone to use. So wheelchairs, canes, strollers. And when I've been at tracks in other communities, just the amount of people that are using it, the seniors, the women walking with their babies, just the friends out for talks and all the athletes being able to use it, it's so beneficial, and the health benefits for all of our members of our community would be huge. And so that's why we're so excited to bring this forward to you, because it's such an incredible opportunity for all of us. So we just really want to thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. And that concludes our presentation. There's the old and the new. That's not the actual new. That's some stadium somewhere. But we have this dream, and we hope you do as well. We are happy to answer any questions.
I wish it was as easy as getting Director Main to give you a sprint and see who wins and get the funding. I think that's sort of a non-starter. Any questions? Director Rogers.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Recognizing this initial request is for $500,000. What timing are you requesting for that? I haven't seen anything that says, okay, you want all of it in 2021 or all of it in 2022, or just wondering when the timing of it. That's my first question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We're looking to secure at least commitment to funds by this fall, and that would be commitment to all of the funds so that we can know going into next spring of 2021 that the project is good to go. The initial commitment as opposed to the actual cash in hand is required in order to go to other granting agencies, including at the provincial and federal level, to demonstrate the commitment locally for them to match or better. And we would think that as we go to those agencies, those entities saying that there's this much local money in hand, that they would not need to see it in the bank, so it could be allocated from a combination of current and future budgets.
Yeah, thank you. Just a follow-up, if I might. So as part of that is if the funding from the regional district representing all the communities, electoral areas within the Oceanside area, and also from School District 69. So basically you're looking at $700,000 to $200,000 from the school district, $500 from the regional district, plus the value of the land that would be provided and made available from the school district. Have you identified what grant programs provincially or federally might be available or might be targeting here? And I ask that only on a concern for the success or otherwise of receiving grants from federal government, because they can tend to have a flavor of the year or flavor of the month or the flavor of the government in power at the time. Forgetting that. So I'm just wondering to what degree have you identified what funding and what grant programs are available for this?
Thank you, Directors. Through you, Chair, Mr. Amos, as the Chair of the Fundraising Subcommittee, will have a more detailed answer than I would, but the short answer is yes. The long answer is?
So the long answer is yes. We've identified quite a number of federal annual grants. Am I not speaking loud enough?
No. We need to get you on the radio here as well.
So yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we've identified a number of federal provincial grants that this would fall into, and again, many of them are annual grants through an agency. Some of them are predicated on accessibility needs, so there's the Rick Hansen Foundation kind of thing. They are basically doing the provincial granting for accessibility granting. We've got Federated Co-op, we've got Mid-Island Co-op grant, and these are, again, these are on our list of to-dos if you want. There's, like I said, the Cow Tire Replay Program, there's Disability Alliance, there's the Rick Hansen I mentioned earlier, there's Government of Canada Enabling Accessibility Fund kind of thing. So there's a number of agencies out there that are in our, if you want, are in our targets, as it were. And many of them are annual reporting. I mean, we're at this point, we're monitoring, obviously, when their cycles come up, recognizing that there's no point in us applying this year if we're not going to plan on building it until next year. And as we indicated earlier, that many of these are predicated on the matching principle. So if we can find $700,000, then they could potentially match it with another 700 if their pool is high enough or deep enough, as it were.
Thank you. And if I may, one more?
I think you're going to have to wait your turn.
Okay.
Director Salter.
Thank you, Chair. I have more than one question, too. So one is the total, so when you spoke about the cost being $2 million, you're giving yourself a little bit of extra money there, but you don't have a toilet, and you don't have lights and these other items that you state you're going to need. So first of all, I think not having a toilet isn't the best idea, but nevertheless, where are you going to get the money for those additional? I don't even know what to call them, items. Amenities. Okay, a washroom. So where would you get the money for a washroom?
When the facility is being used for events, the school is available, and through a joint use agreement, it would be available for any use that's booked by the school district or through the RDN, if the RDN becomes the booking agent. So the school is available for that, and for non-event use, if the community has a need for there to be washrooms on site for weekends, for example, when there's no event scheduled, then we'd have to look at that as a separate project. That's not in our planning at this point.
Thank you, and I have a follow-up. I actually have two follow-ups.
Go ahead.
And so one is, so your costs here are 1.7, but of course you're talking about not possibly getting the funding together for this year, which would mean adding another year or however many. So are you recognizing that with each year the cost of this project will increase?
Yes,
and it could be exponential.
There are contingency and escalation and tax and other considerations in that 1.7-ish million, and the framing it as a $2 million project is to account for further escalation, including anything related to delays.
Okay, so you have a completion cost then, do you, for everything?
The completion cost is as submitted, if it's done within a reasonable time frame, which we would think would be a year. But we're padding that because we know that escalation is a serious issue that comes to projects, and people wish they'd thought about them ahead of time.
So, but completion cost doesn't include the lights? Like,
No.
what is the completion cost? Yeah,
The completion of the project would include the conduited wiring for lights to be added eventually, and consideration of location for temporary bleachers to be added eventually, the track itself and the accessibility.
Yeah.
Those are all in the project, but not the lights, not
they're
the
not costed?
bleachers, not the outside bathrooms.
So they're not costed at this time? Okay,
They're
so
not.
that's fine. And so my last question is, you're stating that the board's desire to enter into a service agreement for ongoing maintenance and eventual track replacement with the regional district. So how would those dollars be, how would you get those dollars to pay for all of these things, for the maintenance and having the regional district involved in maintenance and eventual track replacement? Where would those dollars be coming from?
Two places. One of those would be in the additional project cost that we're estimating to be in that $200,000 to $300,000 range. That flexibility could be used rather than for escalation for a fund for maintenance. The other is that the maintenance of the track is for those people who have built them and know what kind of maintenance is involved. There's very little maintenance. There's a high replacement cost. We'd be looking to talk to the RDN and to the school district about creating a plan with some ongoing funding for a replacement project. Eventually, there was no replacement budget for the current track, which is why we're in the pickle we are. So we would hope that there'd be some interest in the community and within the school district to allocate some ongoing resources in a relatively smaller amount for the eventual replacement. If that did not happen, I don't think that should be a non-starter for the track. I think the track should be built even if there is not a $500,000 replacement budget available. That's something that rather than build in at the front and say, let's put $1 million in the bank for the next one, we just want to get the first one built and trust that the community will come together in finding a way to to build whatever funds are necessary for a 10-year or 15-year eventual upgrade. The replacement of the track eventually is I don't have the cost in front of me, but that's been costed in terms of resurfacing at a relatively small amount compared to a 10-year project with a whole community thinking ahead about that.
And if I can just follow up,
You can when you get in front of the microphone,
I
please.
can if. So similar to we've currently got a working relationship with RDN on Jack Bagley Field already, kind of thing. And so we do the maintenance, we do the cutting and that sort of thing. So it's natural for our grounds folks to do a lot of that work anyways, which is why there's really no added cost to the facility itself. And so like I said, we've got a history with RDN on that site as well as our French Creek site. So it would, again, it would be obviously unique to this site in terms of what the actual agreement looks like. But again, we would build within that agreement the understanding of what to do in a number of years when the resurfacing needs to happen, if that helps.
Including the notion that there's literally no ongoing maintenance cost. The rubberized track looks after itself for a long time, and any of the ancillary maintenance in terms of the mowing and trimming and keeping the entire facility up is routine work of the school district.
Thank you. I failed to recognize Chairman Thorpe as the chair of the RDN, who's joining us today, and I should have done that, and my apologies, sir. But now I'm going to address you as Director Thorpe, and you're up.
Thank you very much, Chair. Through you to the delegation, appreciate the presentation. Very well spoken. Congratulations. All of you. I do have a couple of comments and questions, if I may, Chair. First of all, my background in Nanaimo has a lengthy history involving support of sport and recreation, so I'm very sympathetic to the value of a track in a community. I can't help compare this to my knowledge of the track that exists in Nanaimo. In 1975, it looked the same as what you showed on your video. It has since been rubberized and redone 2 or 3 times at fair expense. But I think back to that project, and it was very much a partnership between the school district of the day, and up until this past year actually, and the Nanaimo Track and Field Club, which I'm sure you're aware is a very successful operation, just as the Oceanside Club is. What I've seen missing in this discussion, if I may be frank, is the involvement from the ground roots level of the Oceanside Track and Field Club and community users. When the Nanaimo facility was developed, it was done largely through volunteer work via the Nanaimo Track and Field Club, support from the school district of Nanaimo, and large support from service clubs such as Rotary, why it's called Rotary Bowl right now. Your funding model seems to be the reverse. You're looking for the big money from the senior levels of government first, and then hoping to get some additional funds from the community later. I guess personally would like to see evidence of where's the support from the Track and Field Club, from the community, that we could say, all right, there's evidence that maybe we should match or support this. I'd love to, but I do worry about the finances, I'm being very honest, and certainly the ongoing maintenance or replacement, shall we say, of the rubberized surface is not insignificant. So I think those costs have to be taken into account as well. But I wonder if I could get to my question, if you wouldn't mind commenting on the involvement of local organizations such as the Track Club.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Director Thorpe. And we have the history with the Oceanside Track and Field organization is extensive. This has been the largest single voice for the renewal of this facility for a very long time. 3 members, lead members of that organization, are in the room now and would speak to, and will, I'm sure, if you ask them to, speak to the importance of this track that they have been touting for years without the financial resources that perhaps the Nanaimo organization had, but with all of the enthusiasm and case making that goes along with the track and field group being front and center, even more than the school district over the years in terms of the importance of this. So Kim and Randy and Jane, as the current president, are here and would be happy to speak to that, I'm sure, if you ask them, if there's time.
Director Thorpe, would you like to hear from some of these?
Chair, I appreciate the offer. I'm not sure that it's necessary at this point, but it's something that I would like to follow up on later, but I know other directors have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Frass.
Could we have Juliet add something just quickly on that?
I just wanted to say that we did a petition a few months ago, and as you were just asking about community support, we had 1,600 signatures in less than 2 weeks. So that is the support with the community, and we have the full list of emails, and that was mainly just the community members. So we have that community support. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Director Frost.
Thank you. Through the chair to the delegation, Kevin, thank you for coming to make the presentation today. I appreciate seeing the track as you guys vision it. Particularly one of the things I've seen in the past was always the discussion about where would a track go, not having enough land or the proper space for it. I know the site's been looked at previously and it said that a track couldn't fit there. So my question is, what has changed now to allow an 8-lane track to fit? And with that, is it displacing other fields or community use spaces that are going to need to be rehomed after a track would be in place?
Through you, Chair, the two short answers are that Corps Engineering has determined that it absolutely will fit. To the first question, I'm not sure why it was determined previously that it would not, but it does. And the answer to the second question is no. It replaces the track in virtually the same location as it is now. It's just slightly larger.
Director Main.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, so be patient, if you will. Only two? Okay. I said that for his benefit. The problem I've got is there's too many questions. First off, let's back up just 1 second. I don't think there's anybody in this room, I don't think there's anybody in the city of Parksville that is against having a track. We all want a track. We, as the members of council for the city of Parksville, know that this is encompassed in our recreation plan that we're putting together. However, what I'm finding is there are too many questions that are unanswered when we're looking at this. For example, $500,000 that came out of the blue, quite frankly, to us. But considering when we were having the conversations around the table, what was said was, do we want bleachers? Well, no, they're going to cost too much, but we never ever came up with how much were they going to cost. Same thing with putting in lights. We never established what the cost of putting lights in for the track was. We never looked at any of the things like washrooms or change room facilities. Who's going to pay for the additional staffing costs when we have events on the weekends and we need staff to maintain the school facilities, if in fact that's where we have it. There's still an awful lot of questions. Then it comes up that the region would cover the maintenance. That was originally what was brought up on it. In fact, it's in the letter from the chair of the board that the ongoing maintenance would be handled by the region. And although, Dr. Elder, I hear what you're saying, that it's not very much, we've got a whole bunch of those bills in the city of Parksville that says not very much, that are now significantly large numbers that are coming in. So there are things. There are questions, for example, where are you going to hold the field events? If the center of your field is going to be for soccer and football, where does the shot put? Where is the javelin? Where's the discus and all the other things, the running jumps and all the other things that they have with it? Where are they going to be held? What about parking? You know, I know somebody acknowledged that we have a parking problem. To acknowledge it is one thing, but we need an answer as to how it's going to be handled. Because you know what? Monday morning after every event, I know whose phone's going to be ringing saying that we've got a problem because people were parked all over the streets in and around the school. So that's a problem. Lighting. If we do in fact put lights in there, what do the neighbors think? What are the neighbors going to think about the lighting? Have we even talked to the neighbors about the fact that we want to now take a normal school day operation and expand that into long weekends and into the evenings and so on? As much as I'm in favor of it, as much as I want to put my hand up and say, yeah, let's go, and in fact, I'd be disappointed if it takes us to 2021 to even get started on this. I would really like to have it done sooner rather than later. But we need to have the answers before we can go any further with this. And that's been my resistance all along here. Let's answer the questions. Let's do this in an orderly fashion. You know, we all have fiduciary duties to our citizens, and we need to make sure that the answers are there before we put up our hand and say, we'll give you $500,000. Thank you.
Just may I comment in response? I'm resisting the temptation to be too excited at this moment. This is exactly the conversation we want to be in. If the RDN were inclined to, in consideration of those very important matters, say it's not well enough scoped out yet, so the answer is no, I'd be extremely disappointed. And I know the community would be. If the RDN were disposed to, in consideration of those matters, say, let's dive into this. Let's find answers to those questions together. Let's create some sort of subcommittee to work with that steering committee. We're a steering committee of amateurs when it comes to this, although we do have 2 or 3 people on the committee whose life's work has led them to have, pardon the pun, a track record of success in these matters. Michael Garland, for example, they know exactly how these projects work and what kind of answers how the answers can be found to those very important questions. So if this stimulates a community-wide dialogue through the RDN in search of answers to those questions, nothing would make us happier. I don't expect, with answers like that, questions like that still out there, that the RDN would say, you know, in a matter of blind faith, let's just send the money and do this. I would hope that the RDN would say, let's work on this together, because one of the things we said at the steering committee level was it's time to convert this conversation from the school district going cap in hand to the community saying this is an important project, let's embrace it and let's answer these important questions. So I thank you very much for that, Mayor.
Director Bain.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. However, I do suggest that perhaps that we should have answered these questions, or at least had a significant number of these questions answered before we came to the region saying we want $500,000. I'm going to guarantee you that $2 million, by the time we're done, it's not even going to touch this. We're going to be significantly over $2 million just based on projects that we constantly see coming in at all well figured out numbers until we actually go to construction. So, you know, we should have as many answers as we can. Maybe it is advantageous to put lights in now. Maybe it is advantageous to buy out a couple of houses in the neighborhood to put a bigger parking lot. I'm just picking that out of the air, by the way. You know, where are we going to have the field events? You know, all these things. Why can't we answer those before we say we want $500,000? We should and need those answers before we can say yay or nay to this. So, thank you.
Director McLean.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff, actually. I was just wondering, will Community Works funds be able to be used for this project, or would it be through taxation, considering that we're looking to match grant funding from the federal government?
Through the chair to the director, community works funds are eligible. Recreation, these type of complexes are suitable for these type of projects. In regards to the budget at present, there is $200,000 has been set aside for track light projects in the budget that's under consideration by the board at this time. So again, community works can be utilized if they've been designated by the electoral areas. Or that we're a municipality, and taxation can also be utilized as well.
Director Wallace.
Thank you, and through the chair, just a question for the delegation. And first off, thank you for coming today. Nice to see you again. I have had multiple conversations with community members regarding a track and how do we figure this out. And certainly I am confident that there's enough brain power and political will in this room to move forward in some way, shape or form in regards to getting a track in the Oceanside area. So I had a question to you regarding the funding. A lot of the questions I had been answered already. You mentioned the school district is committed to this, and there's been a lot of questions in regards to what the current site may limit in regards to a track. So does the school district have the ability to fund a track if it's not on this property? Or to contribute to funding of a track if it's not on this property?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I would leave that to the Board of Education to answer if it's a question that comes forward from the RDN. I know that one of the commitment on behalf of the board is in service to students, having access to that track during the day and during special booking events for the meets that may occur fairly infrequently, but might occur that involve students. So the benefits that come to students is front and center for the Board of Education. If there were to be an ask to provide some support with a dedicated access for students at the right times, then I think the board would receive that request and consider it, but it's not been something that's been in front of them to this point.
Follow up if I may? Thank you.
Please do.
So do you know what just percentage of track usage is required for student use? So if we're looking at an annual basis, what percentage of track usage would be related to school district?
We think it would be much like where tracks are attached to, or community district shared assets are attached to schools in Oak Bay Secondary and in the Souk School District and in Nanaimo, other places where school time is student use, including after school for practices during track season, which is most of the year. You never seem to stop practicing. So, and then infrequently, as I said, for meets that might be occurring on a Saturday, for example. But it's primarily school time that would be reserved for students. But in the same way that now, if a neighbor walks onto the property during school time at Bolinas and wants to walk around the track, they're not sent away. So there may be some way to even have community access during the school day. But the theory is that it's reserved for school use during school time.
One other question, if you don't mind, that didn't get answered
Please
in
do.
regards to transit. So it may be a question for staff. What is the service of transit to this location for the track? I'm unaware, sorry. I didn't look it up.
Through the chair, City of Parksville has the route number 88 bus. So in the plan right now, there is no actually set expansion for the bus for any future events or anything, community events. If there were an event taking place, a larger scale track meet or something like that, we do have a policy in place at the regional district that we can use additional resources if the board decides to for those events within transit. But that said, there's just a community bus right now that operates in a small light-duty vehicle.
Thank you. Director Salter.
Thank you, Chair. So just for follow-up, what I would like to say is that I have been watching the request for this track go around this community for many years. So this is no surprise to me that you're here now, and I'm glad to see you here, finally. Having said that, and I do support a track, and I suspect there will be a track. It's just a matter of time. And that's, I think, where we're at, is the time piece. And the reason, at least for me, my only hesitation is my responsibility to taxpayers. I have to explain, well, how come you're saying yes to this, and what are you saying yes to? And I actually can't answer that. And it is because I don't know the complete costs. So for me, at any rate, when you say that you need the expertise to help you to move forward on this and get those costs and get all that information done, I can tell you there's people in this room that can help you. Right in this room now would be able to figure out those numbers. And they do that all the time. And as directors, as a director, I'll speak for myself, that's where I get a lot of my information from, is from the community, because that's where the expertise is. I'm not an expert in these things. I have an expertise, this isn't it, but there's people in the community who do have it, and they're the ones who help me going forward. And so that's what I rely on, and that's what groups who are putting something together need to rely on, is their community, because that's where the expertise lies. And they can put this together for you, and you need to, for me, I need to see the total cost out. I recognize that cost is going to increase over time, always does. But at least if I see the numbers at the very beginning, the bottom line numbers are, this is what we're looking at. $2 million is not feasible. You're not going to get what you're speaking to for $2 million. It's going to be more. And I'm okay with that too. But I need to know how much more. And then I can explain that to my taxpayers. Well, they've done all this, they've done the costing, and this is the number. And then expect, at least a 30% increase over time. So that's, I think that's what we're hearing around the table here is we need the black and white. We need the numbers. That's our piece. That's what we're responsible for. And second is the maintenance piece. Because when I asked about the regional district, there's a request for the regional district to maintain it, but then your response to me was, well, you don't really need maintenance from the regional district. So that's a little bit, I'm not sure which one it is. So and that's all right, but we need to know which one is it. Do you or don't you? Because there's a cost to that. And if you don't, and we're not interested in the cost then, but if you do, then we need to know that cost too, because that is also going to come out of our budgets. And having our numbers, then we know what the increase to taxes will be to District 69. So I think, as I said, I think we're all in support of this. But for us to be able to say, it's go time, we need those numbers.
May I, Chair?
Please do.
This project has for 10 years, maybe as many as 20, but certainly 10, been in a state of analysis paralysis, and I want us to be past that. As I said earlier, I'm excited about the potential, the prospect for having some people work together on this, beyond those who have worked on it to this point, including, as I said earlier as well, if this matter were to come back from through the committee, from the board, to a staff level conversation that has the RDN staff working as much in lead as the school district staff is, especially informing the questions that are coming from the RDN that are somewhat different from the ones coming from the school district. It would be extremely helpful. I think we'd be able to move the project forward in a way that has not been moved forward in the past by getting those questions in front of some people who can answer them. So we fully support that as a next step.
Well, thank you. And so through the chair, are you requesting from the directors that we support a motion to get the regional district to assist you with coming up with your plan?
Well, it's the community's plan, not to.
Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify.
But
I just need clarification.
Yes, if we are already working with RDN staff, but if the RDN board, if the committee and the board are looking for answers to the good questions that have been asked around this table today, we'd like nothing better than to be in that conversation about them without giving the false promise of us taking them away and saying we'll get back to you with answers. They've been asked in this room, but not come to the steering committee in the form of, look, we need these answers to these questions. And I think if the RDN is looking to support the project and eventually looking to support it financially and needs some answers to some questions first, I think a referral to staff for further pursuit of answers to those specific questions would be most helpful to everybody.
Thank you.
Director Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, a couple of questions that I was going to ask earlier relative to, and I'm certain that the school district is also has to operate relative to asset management as we move forward in these days. And during the discussions with the committee that have put this 1.7 million together forward to us, was that taken into consideration? Because when I look at this, I share many of the questions, many of the concerns that Director Salter and Director Main have expressed relative to the cost, because I don't see this as a viable thing. If I go to support a $500,000 grant, not grant, but a contribution from the RDN, I've got to take a look. If it's $500,000 by 2021, when this is going to be built in this proposal, what's it going to cost our taxpayers for the next 10 years after that? And, you know, share comments from Director Thorpe relative to the experience in Nanaimo and the frequency. I don't think replacing that track and so on is a minor thing. That's a major cost and a major consideration that we as directors would have to take when we're looking at whether or not to even do the 500,000 funding, because you can't do the 500,000 in my mind without knowing what the subsequent time is going to be. Also, I'd be asking the question, the same thing. I couldn't see a facility like this without having a washroom in it, without having considered the parking, without having considered the lighting in a period of time. So relative to the $500,000, that is, in my mind, upfront seed money for it. And so whether it's through this committee, whether it's through direct involvement from the RDN on a more active basis, we haven't, I don't think, even within our work plan within the regional district, we haven't provided the funding to our Parks and Recreation Department to provide the level of service that might take to get some of those answers. So I guess maybe it's not a question so much as comments on that. I'd be looking much more at this from an asset management support. I'd be looking much more from, as Director Thorpe says, we've had reference to community support. That is a different thing than support from the track and field community to fund this a portion significantly more, just like we have an agreement with the curling club that do the funding with the curling club for the maintenance and ongoing operations for that. So that is a different, looking to somehow, maybe you can give us some ideas how we can get that type of support up front, not just the community support. Yeah, I'd like to have a track, and I think we should be doing it, and it should be a priority over a swimming pool or a priority over some other recreation facility. We've got to take a look at that. And then also the same thing with respect to the ongoing maintenance of this and what type of agreement there might be between the regional district and the school district going in that. So, but any comments you have relative to the asset management, and again, enlightening us on the support, maybe somebody else from the audience can, relative support, financial support from the track and field community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. My only comment is that that's the kind of matter that I think would benefit the entire project by way of referral to staff to follow up on getting those the answers to those questions and creating a more fully rounded understanding of what the project would entail from in all elements, including asset management. My hope is that through the committee and working with the board, that there would be an inclination to pursue this project in terms of looking for answers to these important questions. I would hope it would not be rejected out of hand as they don't have enough information yet, so the answer is no. I don't expect the answer to be fully yes either, but I would hope it would be a referral to a next process to find answers to these questions, including that one, and we fully support that from our end, and we would hope that you would from yours.
Thank you very much for that. I'm actually quite surprised at your answer. That the question was rather lengthy. I wasn't sure what you're going to get all those points, but you did, so it was very good. Thank you. Director Main.
Thank you. Don't mean to be sounding cheeky here by any stretch of the imagination, and I truly mean that, but by your own words, you said that the Board of Education would be using this track Monday to Friday in the after-school hours and sometimes on Saturday. Having said that, for us to get any kind of return on our investment, I would think that you're going to need to put lighting in so that we could use it in the evening time just for us to get anything from our contribution. Otherwise, this becomes a Board of Education track with a significant contribution from the RDN, and I have a problem with that part of it. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, and to me, it sounds like it's a Board of Education track based on what you said a little bit earlier. So I leave that the way it is. Thanks.
I think it's finally my turn to chime in on this. So this all rings a bell to me, this whole conversation. Analysis by paralysis, as you so rightly said. Ravensong Pool's been going on for 15 years. I'm not sure what. Yeah. So, you know, we're going to look into it, and we're going to look into it again, then we're going to look into it again, and we'll talk about it again, and then we'll look at it again, and then by the time we look at it the fourth or fifth time, the price has gone up. I'll get you. Thank you. Price has gone up substantially. So I don't disagree that we should start moving on this and quit asking some of these questions. That's just my personal view, of course. A lot of our kids in Qualicum, Parksville, and the surrounding district all travel to Nanaimo to go either to a turf field for soccer, which they have to have now, or to a track field, which they have to have, you know, to compete. You have to have a regulation field, which we don't have. So we travel a lot. People are talking about, you know, green initiatives and a climate emergency, but we're going to travel with all our kids back and forth to Nanaimo to run on a track to come back again. Again, I have a tough time with that. Like, we keep on talking about all these green initiatives and walking and running in healthy environment, and then we go backwards and don't do anything about it. I agree the funding piece is something we're at to work on, and referring to staff, I am really very good with that. I have complete confidence in our staff of the RDN that would be a huge help with this. So replacement funding, I'm not concerned with that. I think that's one of those ones that we do over typical tracks going to last 15 years. Guess what we start paying for today? The same way most of us buy cars or houses, whatever, is we save up for it when it's time for replacement. It's not a big expenditure. We've already got it. My views. Any more comments? I think we can move on and discuss this later. Director McLean, I'm so sorry, I did see your hand.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion related to this delegation, if you will.
Please.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the Regional District of Nanaimo support in principle the recommendation of the Bolinas Track Renewal Steering Committee to plan for the construction of an 8-lane competition standard track at Bolinas Secondary School, with the final decision to come after reports from the school board on all implications, including in relation to funding on both the construction and ongoing maintenance of the track.
That's fine. Seconded by Director Salter. Discussion. Did you? Oh, Director Salter. Oh, Director Wallace, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just a question regarding whether we could consider amending, a friendly amendment to remove some specifics so that we can work towards achieving a track in the Oceanside area, as opposed, if the location is a limitation, that we look at all options so that we can pursue the best option in light of some of the questions I've heard today. So if we could have friendly amendment to remove the specifics about the location, but to pursue the track in Oceanside. Okay, understood.
Very good. Discussion. Director Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and yes, I do support this motion. And I also have a question through you. You did state that we could use Community Works funds towards this project?
Through to the chair. Sorry, I got a bad link today.
Oh, it's me.
Somebody's got this, because too many mics are on. Mine too?
Thanks. It's not my hearing aid. Graham. The provisions are actually through the UBCM criteria that allows for the use of these type of funds for these type of recreational infrastructure projects. So it's actually the criteria of the UBCM program that does provide for that. So in the regional district context, again, gas tax funds do go through to each electoral area for their use. How that is best determined by the board. The municipalities also receive community work funds, but directly to the municipality as well too, but that doesn't come through the regional district.
Thank you for that. So we already have 200,000. The regional district has 200,000 set aside. And so I'm just putting out there that the additional 300,000 would equal 50,000 between each electoral area to reach 500,000. Just putting that out there.
Director McLean.
Yes, I do appreciate that if you split it up equally. Not all areas have the same amount of citizens in them. So I would propose if we were to look at community works funds that it be based on population.
I like that even better.
I would imagine you do. Director Rogers.
Yeah, if I might, through you, a question, staff, and at one point I'm going to ask Director McLean if he would reread the motion, so I've just got a good idea, but taking a look at the context of the motion, do we have within our work plan for 2020 the resources and the work plan allocation, our operational plan to actually fulfill the intent of this motion without amending our current 2020 financial plan?
Through to the chair,
Please.
in regards to the question, financially there's $200,000 in the budget that could be put towards this type of project. As far as the dedication of staff for resources to undertake a project and see it through, even as certainly not in a lead, and even a support is a challenge. As you'll see later today, it's a pretty aggressive work plan that we're working to. So certainly we'd want to work and ensure that the school district is the lead, a primary lead on this review, and then we can backstop that. So funding, yes. Staff resources, they're pretty extended right now. So therefore the request that came from the school district to this committee to take the lead for the first time is welcome. In past times, it's been the RDN on the lead and the school district saying we have the land, basically. So this is the first opportunity that we've had. So if again, and as they are doing, the school district is coordinating the stakeholder group, and if it maintains that way, then it could be viable. But certainly RDN staff don't have the horses in the stable to undertake for a comprehensive development, but certainly can assist with the resources and the expertise that we can provide and pass knowledge as well.
I find it quite common in Qualicum Beach and wherever else that we're very quick to refer to staff and then we wouldn't take 3 or 4 months later when our strategic plan is not getting met, but we've managed to pull 400 more motions on our staff. We wonder why it didn't get done. So I respect what you say there. Director Rogers.
Yeah, and as a follow of that too, one of the discussions that we've had as a board over the last few years, and particularly when we take a look at the Oceanside Recreation Master Plan and so on for the area, was that we did have a challenge in thinking that we could have 3 major projects on at a time when we looked at that thing. The fact that you take a look at the Ravensong Pool aspect and you take a look at the Bolinas track and you take a look at a multiplex, we have said that no, we can't be tackling all those at a time, and we do have to make some choices relative to where we're going to go. So I would just caution that if we want to do this, we want to do it well. Whether we can do it at the same time with staffing and funding, when we talk about resources, we're talking about funding the staff resources. We have to be cautious, I think, on that. So, and I appreciate the the intent of Director McLean's motion, but I'm concerned about the words paralysis by analysis and so on. As we look at these things, we do have to know the costs that are going forward. We do have to know what, when we take a look at the management of an asset over a 10-year life or a 20-year life, we have to know what those projected costs are beforehand, because we're making a commitment. If we build it, we're going to make a commitment to maintain it. And so I have a concern on that, but I certainly appreciate the intent of Director McLean's motion, and I would appreciate it if you could reread it for mine.
Just to clarify before you get started, I think sustainment of these things is all part of our asset management plan, which we're all working on. It's relatively new. We're nowhere near yet. It's the same way we maintain roads or parks or anything else. It's a fund that we look after, and it's an asset that we look after long term. Director McLean.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'll read the motion, and then I'll make my comments. That the Regional District of Nanaimo support in principle the recommendation of the Bolinas Track Renewal Steering Committee to plan for the construction of an 8-lane competition standard track at Bolinas Secondary School, with the final decision to come after reports from the school board on all implications, including in relation to funding of both the construction and the ongoing maintenance of the track.
Thank you, and I'd ask whether I can make a motion for it or not, but a friendly amendment that reports from the RDN staff too, because we don't just need a report from the school district, we need a report from the RDN on what the costs are and the feasibility of this from
I'm okay with that amendment.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I think we need clarification here as to the staff role you envision, because we've not been the project lead here. We've not been involved with the designers. And so if there are certain things that you would like to see come back, and I think the school board has heard those, I think that's properly from the school board. Our staff will review whatever we get from the school board and provide you advice. But if we're looking at whether the site is big enough, or we're looking at what lights would cost, what the running of the lights would cost, what the cleanup of the track would be, how often it would have to be done, what about, what's going in the middle? Is it grass? Is it AstroTurf? What's going in the middle? How do we maintain that? All of those basic questions are project management questions that are properly directed to the project manager. We're pleased to provide our advice once we get that, but if we want to start costing washrooms, etc., then we're taking on a project management role, which we're pleased to do, but we have some major decisions on some other projects, as Mr. Osborne pointed out. And so we're good to work with the school board to refine some of the questions and try and interpret those, and we would probably come back to you and make sure we had captured all of your questions from today by way of a letter and a formal communication to the school board saying, we heard these questions. We'll do our internal financing as to what $500,000 plus operating costs means to your budget in the future, and how and if you want to fund that. Those questions, that's our role. But as for the design of where the washrooms might go and what the cost would be if you put them here or there, and setbacks from neighbors to washrooms, then we're getting into a project management role. And we would be asking you to spend some of your $200,000 for project management. So just for your thoughts.
Director Rogers, is that, would you be okay with without the amendment? To the fact that our staff will still provide us advice and likely a report once we have heard back from the board?
I like the way Ms. Carlisle read it, actually, would work with the school board. I don't think necessarily not taking the lead, but work with, give us some information, guidance, possibly. Director Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. I do have some comment, but I admit to now being confused what exactly I would be speaking to in terms of a motion, so I need some clarification before I comment.
Could we read the motion as it stands, please?
Well, I was asking Director Rogers if he wanted to withdraw his amendment, his friendly amendment.
I don't think it was seconded, so it's not.
It wasn't.
Okay, great. Well, we're back to the original motion, which I think is clear enough. The school board would take the lead. We'd be happy to work with them. Very happy that we have a partner, in my opinion. And I have very confidence that our staff will provide us all the details necessary going forward if we choose to pursue this.
Director Thorpe.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair. So I really appreciate the intent of the motion. I'm not sure that I can support it. I do have some hesitation. I never like the term support in principle because I think it raises false expectations or false hopes. And before looking ahead, I will be able to support this. I will need answers to some very hard questions, especially in terms of finances and where those finances come from. And quite frankly, I would like to see evidence of a hard financial contribution by the main partners that will be using this facility. And I don't see that yet compared to what is being asked of us. I also share Ms. Carlisle's concerns about the regional district being put in a position of becoming project managers for this, which we do not foresee happening, should not foresee happening. This is a school district initiative, and we're happy to provide our advice and input, but there's no way that this becomes one of our projects, in my opinion. So based on those thoughts, I'm not sure that I can support the well-intentioned motion, but I am willing to listen to the views of other directors. Thank you.
Director Main.
Thank you. I will also be voting against this motion. And again, it's for the same reasons as Director Thorpe has indicated. Support is an awful big word to be used in this motion. I don't know that I can support them. I haven't got the answers to the questions to be able to say that I'll support you in principle. It just doesn't, to me, they don't go together. And further to the chair's comments about analysis by paralysis, yeah, we've been kicking this thing down the road for many years. But you know what? It's better to keep kicking than to kick it into the wrong corner. And we've got to make sure that we make the right decision. If we've got this far, a little bit longer may be the right decision to make until we get all of the correct answers and the correct numbers before we pull the trigger. So I just, in my mind, I can't support this. I think we need to have something very level that says that we will work with the board to see if we can answer all of the concerns and questions of the committee before we go any further.
Director Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it seems to me that is the motion. The motion is that the school district work with the group. They get these numbers for us. They get that information together. We support that you're doing that. We do support the project. And we've all said that we do support the project. And so we support the project. What we want to know is we want more detail, which our expectation is the detail will come after you've had your conversation with the school district, the community, whoever it is that you choose to work with. And we support that you do that. I believe that's the intent of the motion, and am I correct with that, Director McLean? Yes. Thank you. So I will be supporting this because I don't see where this is taking me down any road that I can't get out of.
Director Frass.
Thank you, and through the chair to the committee. I'm not quite sure what this motion is accomplishing, even if we were to pass, how it changes any different than if it gets turned down. I think we've already been supporting it in principle. I think this is something that a lot of us spoke about even through the election. It was an item that we know is important to the community. This conversation a lot seems like it's I hear the sense of like an us and an them, like who are these people that are going to be using it and when are we going to get a chance to use it? But when I look at the end of the day, I think a school is the right place to put a track. I think students are the primary users of it. That's where the track and field club is. We've had presentations at Parksville from them as well. And if students are the ones primarily using it, I think that is a win. That is our residents. These are just one taxpayer at the end. So whether it's the school district, whether it's the regional district, it's the same residents that are paying for this track and using it. This question about the $500,000, if we would support it, it's come up before. It got turned down for the same reasons that we're seeing now. It came back to us really without any further questions being changed. So I think it's a little bit perhaps, I don't know if premature is the right word, but to come back again without having any of those questions that were initially addressed in the first place. I won't be supporting this motion just simply because I don't know what it accomplishes, and I would like to see us accomplish something out of it. I think this needs to have those questions answered, and we don't know how they're going to happen. Maybe it needs to go back to the school board for now, and instead of the intent of their meetings coming out of it to ask us for money, find out how we can get those questions answered, because I see that there is a willingness to move forward. So that's my thoughts.
I think it's time to call a question. I just want to speak one more time. I think it's Director McLean's motion. As much as I somewhat agree that in principle doesn't carry the weight that it needs, but we are setting direction for the school board and what we want. The school district, what we need this, and this before moving forward. So I would question that. What we're asking is something new that if we didn't ask it, different answer. So I think it's important that we go through with that. And I am going to vote in favor of that motion. I call the question. All those in favor? We have that. Director McLean, Salter, Weiss, and Wallace. Opposed, Frost, Main, Rogers, and Mr. Thorpe. Motion fails, sorry. Director Frost.
So out of that, I'd like to put a motion forward that we write a letter to the school district outlining what our concerns and our questions are that we need to be answered to further reconsider their request for funding, so that it's a clear request as to why this was turned down and what we're needing.
Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Director Salter opposed? Thank you. I got to give you a hint, Director Salter. You can't whisper to me because my left ear is deaf.
Intentionally.
Correspondence. 5.1. Motion to move for information.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Seconded. Receiving for information. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you. Five point two.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Seconder, Director McLean. All discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Passed unanimously. 5.3. Motion received for information. Director Frass? Seconder? Director Thorpe? All in favor? Oh, sorry, discussion. Director Frost.
I just want to make a mention on this piece here. This is for the Northern Community Economic Development with the town of Qualcomm Beach for their funding that they received. I just want to express a bit of my disappointment in seeing this. I know, not particularly correspondence, but the project that happened. I know this came from a board previous to this one, but in looking at what this money went towards, it was a capital expenditure, a renovation onto a building. And I can't imagine that we would ever approve renovations for a building and consider an economic development, particularly when it goes to a municipal asset. So I just want to express my disappointment in seeing this. I brought this up before, the economic development for the funding, when it came to things for like airport improvements. And my hope is that we don't see future applications for municipal improvements coming out of our Northern Community Economic Development funding.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Reports. Ravensong Aquatic Center Expansion Feasibility Project.
If I can, Mr. Chair, while Ms. Busby's getting ready, Kate Busby from Faulkner Brown Architects will be providing an update on the feedback and additional learnings that have taken place in regards to the Ravensong expansion project. There'll be a series of slides that we'll be going through. There is a handout that's been provided to the committee members. So with that, introduce Kate. Welcome back, and she can take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome back, and very much look forward to your report.
Thanks very much. Once again, I'm Kate Busby. I'm a partner with Faulkner Brown's Architects out of Vancouver. We'd like to thank the Oceanside Services Committee for allowing us this opportunity to provide a progress update for concept design and planning work for expansion to Ravensong Aquatic Center. Today, we'd like to quickly revisit the project background, review project progress to date, the outcomes of the engagement and consultation efforts, review the early design options, discuss costing implications, and what we've learned from the early concept work. Then we'll discuss proposed next steps, followed by comments and input from the Oceanside Services Committee, we hope. Starting with a brief recap of the project, here's how we got to the project to date. It was first officially identified in 2006 that there was a community desire to expand Ravensong, but the early feasibility studies were waylaid in 2010 when approximately $4.8 million worth of remediation work was required. The remediation work didn't increase the space or amenities at the facility. It was simply to address required structural, mechanical, and envelope issues. And the debt required to complete this work was paid off in 2016. The Recreation Services Master Plan, completed in 2019, revisited the expansion to Ravensong as one of 17 infrastructure recommendations. The Master Plan data tells us that swimming and fitness are the highest priority for indoor improvements. Specifically, it recommends new indoor leisure aquatics and lap pool space, and possibly the opportunity to provide a public fitness and wellness center and multi-purpose programming rooms. Statistically, Ravensong is the most used indoor recreation facility in Oceanside. Swim visits and program attendance continue to grow, and the facility is at capacity and no longer able to meet the growing demand. That being said, there are varying opinions within the community on how to meet this indoor growing aquatic needs. Generally, one 25-meter pool for a community between a population of 30 to 40 million residents is deemed adequate. Ravensong is on the small side of facilities with no significant leisure aquatics amenity. Its greatest challenge is meeting competing user needs due to the limited water area. A second indoor facility would typically be deemed warranted when the population reaches about 60 to 70,000 residents. But every community is unique, and it's up to each community's residents and leaders to determine those individual needs. This chart benchmarks a few comparable BC communities. We note that 2 indoor aquatics facilities are usually found in communities that are over 60,000. It's really difficult to compare facility operations costs. There is a great variety in how facilities' debt and expenditures are measured, including calculating the recovery costs. But that being said, pools generally require significant annual subsidies to operate, and operating 2 facilities doubles the operating expenditures. This was a strong factor in the master plan recommendation to meet the increasing aquatics needs with an expansion option over a new pool option. A few observed factors in operating multiple facilities. Leisure amenities is really what drives utilization, typically. There are some efficiencies in achieving or operating 2 facilities if under one entity, as in not having to double management costs and other staffing such as administration. And if there are 2 facilities in the community, it helps to distinguish a target market for each of the facilities to best meet the diverse needs. For Oceanside, Ravensong Aquatic Center is centrally located and it's the only pool facility in approximately 45-minute driving range. This highlights the importance of keeping the facility operational and minimizing any required closures in the event of construction. In assessing future options, we recognize that a significant financial investment will be required for any increase in aquatics provision, given the high operations costs associated with aquatic facilities, but the rampant escalating construction costs. For the community's sake, any development needs to be appropriately sized for the market, and keeping the facility open to the public is a priority. The project goal that we worked with the RDN staff team to develop is to plan for deliverable indoor aquatics and wellness amenities that will meet the evolving needs and resources of the community. The the RDN has approved the first phase of the project. The next stage, stage 2, would be a preparation for referendum, where ultimately community members would decide on whether to proceed to phase 3 and 4, design and construction. Phase 1 project work began late last year. We facilitated early stakeholder consultation with user groups and began design work with the RDN team, and we worked with our consulting engineers. We have a full team of engineers, structural, mechanical, electrical, and envelope, to develop 4 design options for presentation at open house. These have been costed, and that brings us to today's presentation, right here. The next steps are to take what we've learned from the early concept design work and the engineers' reports and the associated cost estimates and apply that knowledge to the development of preferred design options, which will then be refined and costed and presented back to the OSC for review prior to a second and final public open houses. We've undertaken a variety of community participation methods, focus group meetings, an open survey, pop-up events, open houses, and our second public survey is available now online. This is a recap of what we've heard. This November, we met with representatives from a variety of community organizations to get their input. The priorities identified were very much reflected of the master plan recommendations in terms of both aquatic and non-aquatic amenity priorities. We ran an open survey these are what we heard from the stakeholder user groups, aquatics and non-aquatics. They're very much in line with the master plan. We ran an open survey that was available online, but also in paper format. And it really was looking at addressing the preferences and priorities for both the aquatics and non-aquatics amenities. The results, once again, aligned with the master plan recommendations and provided some additional insights that helped inform the open house option development. The first round of open houses were held late last month. They were delayed 1 week due to the snowstorm. We ran 4 sessions. 2 were in Parksville and 2 in Qualicum Beach. Combined, there was approximately 140 attendees. The majority of the conversation and comments posted were related to specific input related to the expansion features and amenities. Approximately 15% of the attendees' comments were about location and whether a new facility in Parksville was a preferable option. In the lead up to the open houses, our architectural team worked with the RDN staff and our engineering consultants to develop concept design options that were reflective of both the master plan recommendations, but also what we heard in our early engagement. All of the options that we presented at open house address the kind of those priorities. They also incorporate phased construction sequencing that would allow the aquatic center to remain open and operational throughout most of construction. The options also roughly include the same amenities and expansion areas. And this was intentional so that we could look at different unique expansion configurations and get the public's feedback on what those configurations mean to them. The options all ensure a single control point for increased security and efficiency, and they incorporate required seismic and site servicing upgrades. All of the options have the same added amenities, and so we're just going to quickly go through them here. The base amenities are additional pool lanes, expansion of change rooms, and then all of this is support spaces for those kind of expansion areas. The other amenities for consideration that we consider optional are the leisure pool and teach pool, lazy river, larger hot tub, and all of these were included in all of the design options that we looked at open house. A wellness center, multi-purpose rooms, on-deck viewing area, additional deck area, a larger steam room and sauna, and based on input from the open survey, we put the option of a water slide so we could get separate pricing. So to recap, all the options are designed for phased construction to minimize closures, and they all require seismic upgrades to the existing areas and provide the same additional amenities. So I'll just quickly go through the options that we developed and presented. The gray portion here is the existing facility, and then the colored areas are what would be added on. So option A was a eastward expansion entirely. It would take over some of the parking area, and there would be needed to be expanded parking to the north to make up that parking area. All the rest of the options focus on primarily focus on a western expansion. So this is a west expansion that's all one level, and it really looks at connecting to the Civic Center. We worked with Qualicum Beach in our integrated design process and meetings with the engineering team, and that was something that was identified as of interest. We looked at an option that is a western expansion but does not connect to the Civic Center. But all of these options you can see are phased. So we'd build the first part of the new expansion, and then we would temporarily operate that new component while we would go in and renovate the existing facility and do the required upgrades for seismic. Option D is an option that minimizes the impact to the Civic Center in terms of the west expansion by splitting the aquatics expansion off two ends. This would be much more costly in terms of splitting the mechanical up, but it was one that we wanted to look at in terms of a potential option. There's some programming benefits that way. So costing. Both the capital and operational cost estimates were prepared by costing professionals for the open house options. These Class D estimates have a margin of error of about 20%, so they're useful for comparing, but they do have, they're a very high level cost estimate. Escalation is projected at 5% per year. So based on the potential timeline to start of construction in 2022, the cost could increase by over 15%. So the overall capital costs for the open house options range from about $26 million to $30 million for an increased facility area of roughly 2.2 times the existing facility size, providing 2.3 times the water area. We'll come back to this comparative slide in a minute after we look more in depth at the value of the existing Ravensong Aquatic Center. The open house cost estimates, using option C as a basis of discussion, as it was a popular option, and it's also favorable from a constructability standpoint. For comparison purposes, we'll also provide some very high-level costing for an expansion option with a 30% reduced area. And we'll compare costs to build a new facility. So we use the existing Ravensong Aquatic Center as a sized area for just comparing what new facility costs would look like. So the cost to build Ravensong today, based on the values that we applied for our open house option costing, this is 2020 construction costing, would be approximately $17 million. Our current operating subsidy required through taxation is about $1.7 million per year, based on the 2018 actuals. Significant investments have been made in the 2010 remediation work, and subsequently, in subsequent work, the facility is in good shape and shouldn't require any major expenditures for 10 to 15 years, and I think this is important to note. The open house expansion options increase the overall area by 2.2 times, providing leisure aquatics, 4 additional 25-meter lanes, a larger hot tub, a fitness center, a multi-purpose space, and an overall cost of $26.7 million. The operations cost would increase the taxation required by approximately 30% to $570,000 increase over the existing annual costs. Given the demand existing for a number of future potential capital projects, the capital costs for the expansion project as envisioned in Open House 1 is likely too high to be supported by the Oceanside community. All of the costs came in at over $26 million. The operation costs for the expansion project as envisioned in Open House 1 are possibly in the range of what would be supported by the Oceanside community. For all of the open house options presented, the overall cost of operating the facility would be projected to increase by 30 to 45%, between $500,000 and $800,000 annually. So for comparison purposes, we briefly put together kind of a reduced option, reduced kind of area option, looking at a option that provides some of the same amenities at a 30% area reduction. This version keeps the fitness facility, minimizes the aquatic expansion to an additional 4-lane warm water pool. We see that construction costs are very much tied to the overall areas, and so we see a capital cost reduction to about $20 million, but the operation costs would still increase by about 30%. We checked with the operation consultant, and he doesn't think that it would be a great difference in the operation cost increases. Next, we look at a 2-pool option. We took the existing Ravensong Aquatic Facility as a basis for area and amenity. This definitely isn't an apples for apples comparison. Adding another Ravensong-sized facility, sized pool on an undetermined site would not completely meet the community needs as defined in the master plan and the early engagement. Specifically, wouldn't provide the leisure aquatic space and the fitness components that are considered desired. But it does show us that the costs associated with the expansion project are very high. And it also highlights the significant estimated increase in operation costs for the second pool option. So in preparing the costing and expansion options, we learned from a capital costing point that there are required seismic upgrades, and they have a significant associated costs. There are mechanical and electrical upgrades that would be required dependent on the configuration. There are policies in place that would require some sustainability measures, and we've accounted for those in this costing exercise. Major envelope upgrades and some photovoltaics that have very significant costs. Site development and off-site works, there is work that would need to be done, and any second level option would have very high associated capital cost. From an operation cost standpoint, the expansion options would lead to an increase of about 30 to 45% increase. A 2-pool option would double the operation costs, so it would lead to about a $1.6 million increase in the annual operating deficit. The next steps. So we have an open survey online on the Get Involved RDN site right now, where we're really trying to better understand community priorities relative to the project. So we're looking at prioritization of amenities, the importance to the community of the fitness component, the importance to the community of the multipurpose room, trying to collect more data on that. And we need to also recognize that the RDN strategic plan, climate change strategies, that's a consideration. So we are looking for community input onto them, what the importance of reduced environmental impacts and sustainability measures are. Our proposed next steps, given the very, very high construction costs, are to explore strategies to significantly reduce capital cost estimates, reducing the overall areas of both the water areas and the other areas, eliminating second floor options, reducing amenities that may not be considered major priorities, and reviewing the sustainability measures. We'll be developing revised design options, including Class D cost estimates with the RDN staff, and we'd like to do a follow-up review with the Oceanside Services Committee to look at determining a preferred option based on the revised design options. We will be performing an energy modeling and envelope review. That was part of the initial scope of services, so we'll be able to determine the costs associated with capital cost investments that would be made related to climate change strategies and working towards the net zero project. And we'll be able to pick those out and see the associated cost implications from a capital cost, and then what the operational cost implications would be, because oftentimes they'll bring down the operation costs. And then ultimately we'll present at Open House 2, more of an information session. We'll be presenting the preferred option, the costing, and the finalized kind of refined design. So this is where we are today. As I said, we'd be working towards this preferred design option, associated costing, represent to the Oceanside Services Committee in May, and then following up with open houses and a final report in June, and following up with the review by the RDN board. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time.
Exceptional report, thank you. Of course, I knew, like, esteemed colleague, Mr. May will be the first one up. So. Director May.
Thank you, sir. Chair. First off, I want to clarify a few things because you were moving pretty fast.
Yes,
through
I'm
there,
sorry. There's a lot of
that's
content
all right.
to cover.
No, I appreciate your taking your time and doing all of that. But you made a comment that the facility was at capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I saw the numbers, it was nowhere near capacity except for one time slot on each day. I don't know, am I wrong in that? When I read the numbers and how many people were being used, it didn't show to me that it was being used anywhere near capacity except for one time slot, which was the fitness program. And
yeah,
that was the only place that it was.
That is the master plan kind of comments related to that were for the peak hours of utilization, but it is a heavily used facility, and anecdotally, that's what we're hearing from stakeholders. Many people not using the facility because it is operating at a very high level.
I'm going to keep going if you don't mind on this. All right. I'm not sure I agree with what you're saying, but you've said it, so there it is.
We have the same operations consultant on our team that did work on the master plan project, and he's a sport expert, so we're going off of his professional input.
But just the numbers tell you that it's not. When you look on the per hour numbers, it's not there. Anyways, we'll leave that go. One very, very important comment that you made a couple times was that for one community, two pools and all that. We're not one community. We're two communities. We're Parksville and we're Qualicum Beach, and then on top of that we have 3 electoral areas stuck in and around that. It's a very different thing than saying the city of Nanaimo. It is 2 very distinct possibilities. My biggest concern here is when we went through this discussion when I was first elected, we had one of our first meetings, and this was brought up, and it was strictly, we're just going to add some lanes in order to expand to meet the requirements for the fitness group. And that was what we were going to do. And it was going to cost, if I recall, and you know, I'm old, so you have to bear with me with my memory. But my understanding is at that time, it was going to be $9 million. Now, I don't know where I come up with that number, but that was the number that I remember. And now we're sitting here and we're saying, oh, we're going to add a fitness center, we're going to add another massive hot tub, we're going to put a slide, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And now we're running between, what, 26 and $30 million. It sounds like my wife building my house, my last house, where it went from X to Y very quickly. But the reality is that we've taken this massive jump, and I have a problem with that. We didn't approve that as this committee. We approved adding 4 lanes, if I'm not mistaken. And the last point, and it's just, maybe just I misheard, but it said you would double your operation expenses for a second pool, and I'm not quite sure how that works. I mean, and then you had $1.6 million down as the operational expenses for the second pool. Is that not, it's $800,000 for one pool and $800,000 for another pool? So you've actually increased your
No, the current operating expenses are $1.6 million, or
Okay,
close to
then
1.7. So we'd
explain
be
to me, if you
doubling it.
would.
It'd be doubling 1.7, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and that's based on a very small facility pool operation.
All right, so you're saying that you're just doubling that number, because the way I read it,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
it's just
All right.
very high level.
All right, that doesn't
Double your
scare-
pools, double the
Doesn't
operation
scare me near
costs,
as
yeah.
much as when I first read it then.
Yeah, okay.
But the other numbers do, and I have a real concern with them, but thank you for listening to
A
me.
lot of the pools that were over on the mainland, and they were really awesome pools. I would love to have one in Qualicum. But we can't afford that. So I'm glad to see you removed the lazy river and all those other little things that really are fun, but we can't afford. I am wondering what happened to the original request for a tank and a changing room, because that's what we were looking for with regard to expansion. And will that be an option going forward when we come back in May? Would you be able to provide us with that, that option of the very basic original cost? And also, I would like to know the cost per taxpayer. So I would like to see those numbers pulled out per taxpayer per year, so that we have those numbers.
Through to the chair to answer some of the questions more directed, probably appropriate by staff in regards to the project. As part of this exercise, we did want to, and as outlined by and approved through the committee, was to verify with the community what amenities they feel would be best suited in an expanded facility, and take that opportunity to get that feedback and to cost that those amenities as well, and that's what we've done to date. Going forward, again, what Ms. Busby's team is recommending is to review and refine further the envelope, and you'll see in some of our slides where you'll make some savings just in some changes, and where you'll see larger changes financially by reducing some features, and where you'll reduce some features and see very minimal changes as well too. And so you'll see an escalation in one of the slides as well that we'll focus on as well, so you get dollar for bang for your buck on that front. So the idea is, as we move towards those final reports to the board, we will be providing the financial implications to each one of the participants in the pool, but we are still at the refinement and costing component. But in the end, there will be a decision by this board, through this committee and the RDM board, on whether to move forward with the expansion option once it's refined, and the pros and cons of that. Or to look at other alternatives as well too. So in the end, there will be a full analysis, and that's also tied to the energy modeling that we're speaking to. We need to get down to that very specific level to give you the very specific information that the committee needs to have on hand to make a good decision. So with that, the engagement piece is still underway, and you now have answers for how much would it cost for various amenities and features, and then decisions will be made to start scaling that back. And then also, Ms. Busby's team's been very good to work with, is to provide us what I'll call the benchmarking exercise on what would it take to build an additional facility, and Parks will be undertaking that as well. So there'll be a good analysis to review on that front, because there'll be a decision made on, as you see, the capital costs are coming in relatively equal to build a separate facility. The question will be the operating component and the expenditure to operate two facilities financially, and the resources to undertake that as well too. So we're adding that component to this, so we can provide this committee and the board the best material to make a good decision at the end. So all that information will be laid out. We're just moving through the process. We'll be bringing back a scaled version, and then there'll be a decision to move forward or look at other options.
Thank you. Just one more time. So my question was, when the options come forward to us again, will we have an option 5, which is here, tank, the larger change rooms, and the cost to our electorate?
My recommendation has been to bring forward 2 options, cost out both of them, one that is a very, very reduced option, and one that provides more of the amenities that are requested by the community, not to the extreme extent that we presented at open house, but so that we can see the range. My main concern is doing an expansion to this facility has these built-in upgrade requirements that have very significant, very weighty costs associated with them, seismic being one of them. And so we have to consider, the cost to build this facility, with due diligence, to make this expansion, to close the facility for an extended period of time. That's just part of this process, is to make that very clear. But we'll have costing for a very base facility, and then one that has tied more to the recommendations of the master plan, which include the leisure component. That would be our recommendation.
Councillor Frass. It's Councillor Frass, I'm sorry, Director Frass.
Thank you. Through the chair to, I guess, staff will be my first question here. For the Oceanside region, what is our current population with all the electoral areas and municipalities here?
We have a slide, and
Okay,
we'll pull
right,
up. It's about 45,000. We're not including electoral area E because they're not a participant in the aquatic service. So if you expand that further, it gets a little bit larger.
So it's, just under 47,000 for the total area.
That doesn't include Area E, so with Area E, we're... Okay. My question is, my next question here, just based around Ravensong, it looked like we had about 11 years of lifespan out of it until it was required for, or identified that it was running at capacity, so to speak, and needing some more water space there. If we were to go with the most cost-reduced option that you mentioned there, the revised option with reduced area, 30%, being the most cost-effective, what would be the expected lifespan out of that to serve the community as it is until we would then be reaching that point of, you guys are going to need to be having, another expansion or adding on more, or a second facility? What kind of life will we get out of it?
So for the mechanical systems, they have about a 20 to 25-year lifespan, and that's why some of those systems for the existing tanks have already been replaced. But for the building itself, I mean, these facilities can easily last 50 to 100 years. The structure itself would last 100 years. That's the level that we build to.
I guess my question was more based around as far as population growth. When you look at communities growing into the facilities, how long do you think that would serve the residents until we reach then a capacity again to where we need more water again?
I mean, it depends on what water area we provide. Really, if we provide a larger facility, but say based on the reduced option, this would probably take us to the 60 or 80,000 resident mark.
Like, in terms of years, is that like a 6-year, an 8-year, a 10, 12, 15 years?
Well, so the 2030 is when we put, that it's projected that they could meet the 60,000.
2030,
Yeah,
so we're
but
looking
I
at-
don't know the population projections to
So
70
we're
or 80.
looking around 10, less than 10 years.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's community by community, that's just a benchmark.
I can't help myself, I just can't do it. It'll last just long enough for Parksville to build their pool. I had to say it, sorry.
Wait a minute.
I had to say
all
it.
this time to get their stuff.
Yeah. Further comments? Director Wallace.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It's amazing as always. Question regarding the slide under 3, consultation and engagement. 77 comments, 15, 28, and 39 equal 82%. So just wondering if there were any comments from anyone that perhaps they didn't want a pool expansion. There was.
Yeah, that would be the 15% were
Okay.
related to location, and that or not a pool expansion at all.
Right,
Yeah.
so I guess from the consultation process, which I know was very rigorous and very engaged and quite impressive, did people come out to suggest that there were no requirements for pool expansions in the Oceanside area?
I did not hear that comment from anyone. Nobody came out to say
Okay.
that they didn't want to.
Sure.
But that's reflective of the type of people who generally come out to these events.
Yeah.
It's quite an effort itself, and I think that we have to, bear that in mind.
But you also had online, so did you receive any comments that were negative to the process online?
I don't recall. Oh, very minor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
so-
sorry. Yeah, I'm sure that there were some.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was the question asked about a new facility in Parksville? Because we've got a bit of a rolling timeline here. This project has been going on for a very long time, and the option of having another pool in Parksville seems it's fairly recent. So I'm not sure in your master timeline when we're looking at options in May. If you're aware, or maybe staff can answer this question, or maybe Parksville can answer this question, where are we in the scoping out of the possibility of a pool in Parksville? From a timeline perspective, to be able to inform the community of what options we'd be looking at for a pool of some sort, or an expansion of pool of some sort in the Oceanside area, which is just one area full of about 47,000 people, in the whatever timeline has been laid out here for the next steps.
Director Main.
Thank you, Chair. We are currently doing the feasibility study. We're going to be starting our interviews next week. It is our anticipation that by the end of summer, we should be at least narrowed it right down as to what we want and whether we can afford it or not. And so that'll probably be where we're going to be at.
Please.
Sorry, new button, new technology.
Yeah.
Old. So, sorry, I'm just looking at the timeline that Kate's provided here. We'll have further costing options for a downsized option for Ravensong in May, I believe. Right? And so the timelines for Parksville's feasibility study are to be completed, including costing by?
I would like to say yesterday, but it's not going to happen. I would think towards the end of summer is the reasonable expectation.
Thank you. One further question, if I could. I had asked, how was the question asked at the open house in regards to the new facility in Parksville? Were we asking a question, or were people just giving us information?
So the 15% was reflective of the number of comments that we received on the comment board, but we also did a vote for the 4 expansion options, giving a last option, which is no expansion to the existing Ravensong facility, and exactly 15% of the comments were related to those. So, but I mean, it isn't a representative number of the community members. When we have the second the second online, the second survey, open survey online, and that should be more reflective of the community at large because there'll be more participants, and we're asking the same question. We don't ask this question specifically.
Okay, so is it 15 out of the 82%? So that would be 18% of overall questions or 15% of overall questions?
15% of the overall. The remaining comments were just specific to which option people liked. So that made up the difference. So.
If I could ask staff, I'm not sure where this would go. If we went ahead as planned with Ravensong versus a different tank or pool, whatever that looked like in Parksville, that's no disrespect meant, by the way I phrased that. Completion time difference. Are we talking, like right now, if we continue with Ravensong, we could be possibly in the ground by next summer, I'm guessing? No. I don't know. So finish the question. You know, for Parksville to start a new process with a pool recreation center, is it 10 years longer than the pool? That's what I'm getting at.
I'll get Ms. Busby to answer the technical question because it is sort of, and you can speak to if you were to get it once you have approval of the funds and going forward from that step.
Yeah, I mean, really to fund the project, we would have to go out to referendum, so there would be the referendum period. So if, say, in the spring, the early summer, there was a vote to move forward to referendum, and everything moved very quickly, and sometime in the fall, there could be a referendum period. Then we could begin, and if it passed, with a simple majority, then we could move forward to detailed design, which would be at least 6 months of detailed design and construction documentation. So it would probably take us to maybe potentially starting in the ground the following summer. But really the design period time would start after the referendum vote, which I would imagine would be required for any community to take on this debt servicing. So there'd be no change to the timeline for either project, given that. I can speak to an expansion project would likely take longer to complete because it would require phasing, construction sequencing, unless the pool was closed for an extensive period of time, which we're recommending would be very difficult for the community. So we're recommending not to do that if possible.
Very good. One more comment, that was around the public engagement process. Like we've all been through that, is when we do extensive, which we have with Ravensong, extensive public engagement, and then people spend enough time and passion filling out these different things, and then we go, psych, we're not doing that. Then there's the other side of that is we don't do public education or public consultation, and we ram it through, and then we get help for that as well. So we've gone through considerable amount of consultation on this. I'm not sure how many for years, but extensively in the last 6 months again. So I just want to bear, warning of the ramifications by if we don't listen to what all these people are saying. We have to listen this time, and we have to act on what they're saying. I'm good. Please do.
Can somebody tell me how many surveys were filled out or completed? No, 77 were the number of people, wasn't it, at the...
There was just over 300 surveys completed over the course of a month. So that's a short time period, and there wasn't a lot of lead up to it. Actually, compared to other sport complex engagement processes, this is a pretty tight timeline. So that's the one way that we can try to increase engagement is a longer timeline period. So we might want to consider that for the second survey if we have that time available. Yeah.
So in total, just quick question, and in total it was 377 or under 400 responses to this extensive public response for the pool. Would that be fair?
Sorry, I don't follow the question.
Well, you've got 400. In total, you received 400 replies, either verbally at the public meetings or by the surveys being completed. So there was approximately 400, all right? So it's less, it's 0.001% of the total population. So I don't think we're getting an extensive view of the
No,
population.
it would not be a statistically valid representation of the.
Just to clarify before I go to Director Frost. I love you. We've been doing this for 15 years. I'm not sure how many times we've spoke to these people. So it's not the 400. I would guess it's significantly more. Director Frost.
Thank you. Through the chair to Kate Busby. Recognizing that Parksville is undergoing a feasibility study, has there been any attempt to reach out to the city of Parksville to collaborate with them, or is there plans to speak with them and meet with them to ensure that any plans are collaborative and not competing uses?
I'll defer that to staff.
The process that we followed or are following is open, and through this committee is the feedback that we're providing to the various participants in the aquatic function that is Ravensong. And that includes Parksville, and that's the engagement piece that we're doing today. We have had meetings with the CEO and the Mayor of Parksville regards to the aquatic space, if you will, and that's when we're informed as well of the anticipated timeline coming forward. I understand through the Parcels project that staff will be engaged with by their firm to provide information to that project as well too. We're highly cognizant of the timing of this coming forward, so that's why we're working to that May-July timeline, and anticipation of that the parcel project might be coming through around the spring, so there can be a comparative exercise taking place before you move forward at the same time, kind of thing. So I can only speak to the process that we're following. That means engaging with staff and the communities through the open houses. It also, the information that is coming true is running parallel and has confirmed the master plan process. That was a more comprehensive full engagement process in regards to engaging the community with statistically valid surveys and so forth. So it's anecdotal, and the representation is less, but it is consistent to what we did here in 2018. So to answer your question, we are always open for dialogue with our participant member municipalities, including Qualicum and Parksville, and encourage that, and ultimately so the best decision can be made to go forward on the addition of aquatic space in the Oceanside area.
Okay, thank you. And my comment out of that then just would be that I hope as that process continues that it looks at perhaps even like partnership on it, because whether it's the region or Parksville and however we get the more pool facilities, I think is definitely the goal for all of us. Thank you.
Okay, moving forward at this point, do we need anything?
Through to the chair, it is a status update to show the timeline. Important dates and milestones have been presented. You'll see that there is an additional Oceanside Service Committee that's been recommended for June to get this to the board in July. It also allows the design team and the engineers to work diligently to get the costing refined further to give you guys this committee the best information possible. So the purpose is to provide this update and give you a status of the findings today.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead, keep it short because it's time to move on. Director Salter and Director Main, and we're moving on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to make a motion, actually, and I would like to make a motion that with the options that come to us going forward, that one of those options is simply the basic plan that we had originally discussed going forward with regard to Ravensong, and that was the additional tank for the lane and the expansion of the change rooms. And when you look on your handout, you'll see that the highest number, at least I know it's not a great stat, but 53% of the respondents requested an additional lane and 40% change rooms, and that's the highest request with regard to the amount of people who responded back. So I would like to see the cost, just the cost for that, because that was the original plan. I would like to see that in our options, please.
Seconded by Director Frost. Comments? Seeing none, all those, Director McLean.
Can I just get clarification on the motion, please?
Sorry?
Can I get clarification on the motion?
You want
You want it reread? Is that you want?
Yes, can you please reread the motion?
Thank you.
So the motion is to have a third option. I heard you state there would be two, so, or however many options, but an additional option, which would simply be the cost to the communities for the basic addition to the pool, which we had originally done, and that's the additional lane and the expanded change rooms.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Director Thorpe is opposed. Thank you. Oceanside Services Victims. Sorry? Yes, did. Do we need a motion to receive the report? Okay. Motion received. Seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Oceanside Victim Services Funding Agreement. Motion to receive the motion for the staff report. Director Frost. Seconder. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Thank you. Business arising from delegations, I don't believe we have any. New business. Director Frost, Parksville Curling Rink.
Thank you to the committee through the chair. Just wanted to bring up the discussion on the curling rink coming out of our last committee of the whole meeting. It was, we talked about through the budget, there being money taxed to put aside for the demolition of the Parksville curling rink. And the conversation was about our lease expiring in 2023 and that the RDN, if Parksville would not renew the lease, that RDN would be required to demolish the building. And so we'd be looking at putting some money aside to it. I wanted to have a conversation here so we could discuss a little further, just dealing strictly with the directors here that are involved in paying that, so we'd have a little bit more fair conversation about it. And particularly because I think it makes a lot of assumptions that the building would need to be demolished in 2023, which I have the lease here with me and I've looked through it. I don't read it that way, so I guess I wanted to get a little bit more staff input onto that and also get some feedback from here. And stemming out of this, I'd like to put a motion forward afterwards that we'll see what the conversation that comes out of it. But. So I guess looking for some staff input, just some more clarification on where that idea is that we'd have to demolish the building in 2023 is.
So the lease between the regional district and the city of Nanaimo has been in place since almost 1972. Oh, sorry, you caught me on that one. But between the city of Parksville and since 1972. It has been restricted to 5-year terms because of a trust condition on the property at the Parksville Community Park. So in 5 years or thereabouts, it's always been renewed and going forward. It was recently renewed roughly 2-3 years ago. And it is coming up for that. The conditions of the lease, should it not be renewed, require that the land be restored and remediated back to the agreed upon condition. And that is an obligation to the Regional District of Nanaimo. So that is what we are working to. In light of the, when an Oceanside Place was built, that was the primary purpose, was to provide arena space. And thankfully, at the time, there was a curling club that was a little bit homeless at the time, and they wanted a space, and they assumed the responsibility of the arena. And that's been a good arrangement over the years, and they've worked hard to do that. However, there still is that obligation that we have to recognize as a regional district. There is an encumbrance. It's like an asset management encumbrance, if you will, to ensure that the funds are in place should that not be renewed. So that is why the recommendations of the past, it was to put the necessary funds into the reserve for the eventual removal of that facility. As mentioned at the committee of the whole, the master plan speaks to the need for additional curling space. And we tested that because there's a lot of communities that you don't need additional curling space. We are not in one of those communities. There's with 2 curling facilities between Qualicum Beach and the Parcel Curling Club. If we remove one, you're going to have a surplus curlers for those facilities. So the master plan speaks to the Qualicum Beach, Parksville, and the regional district to work collaboratively on ensuring that there's adequate curling space there. So there's sort of 2 things at play. There's the responsibility of a leaseholder and encumbrance on their asset management to have that $1.1 million now to remove the facility. And then on the recreation aspect, there's a need to ensure that the community is being served. So there's your tug and pull right there. But under due diligence, that's why it was being recommended over the years to ensure that there's adequate funds should the lease not be renewed.
Thank you very much. Well, I should just, do you want to respond to that first, Director Frost?
I'll let the committee have a chance. I will respond afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wallace.
Thank you, and through the chair. So really what we're talking about is money over time. And as an asset, I understand that there's a lot of comprehensive work going towards asset management at the RDN in 2020 through the operational plan. And so this is an asset. And so I asked the question the other evening, do we know the length or the time of the building? And so therefore how much money we need to put away against that timeline. And so I guess that's what I was hoping for, was a little bit more specifics. And related to that, there was a question asked regarding a surplus at Oceanside, and I understand these are 2 different facilities, but they are rink facilities as part of the service delivery for recreation in Oceanside. And so is there any interconnectivity with that surplus, or do we know what that surplus is for before we start putting more funds away against a timeline that's uncertain from taxation for arena space in Parksville?
Through the chair, in response to the first question, and very similar to what Ms. Busby answered in regards to Ramsong Aquatic Center, the bones of the building is as good as whatever infrastructure you put on it or around it to maintain it. The curling club did make improvements to the chiller of one of the components that expands that section of the building to a 25-year period. I don't have up-to-date information on the additional aspects of that building and how they'd be renewed. There was a study done 3 years ago that outlined some capital costs, and we can provide additional information to this committee on that finding if it's as being requested. That could be done. The arena function is the same function because the budget is in the reserve. There was a capital amount of funding for future capital projects at Oceanside Place that are in the current 5-year plan, and that is for compressors coming forward, air handling units, eventual build-up for replacement of roofs and so forth as well too. So that is for the existing building. The capital costs related to the curling club are sole responsibility of the curling club per the agreement. So we do not budget for those capital costs as per directed by the board through the agreement with them. So we do not set funds aside through the regional district budget to do that. Okay.
Director Bain.
Thank you, Chair. The argument, discussion of, every 5 years the lease doing, so therefore we should have started in 1977 then and had the money set aside based on that argument. But the reality is that it's not going to happen. And if it does happen, the people sitting around this table are the individuals that will end up having to share the costs of it, nobody else. And so I'd rather keep the money in my bank account than in the regional bank account. My bank account not being mine personally, but the City of Parksville's bank account. I'd rather keep the money there. We have the facilities to be able to do that. I don't see the requirement of putting a reserve account on this. If in fact you were paying for all the repairs and maintenance and ongoing with with the facility, then absolutely, I agree. If you would have then just recently paid for the chiller, and it would have come out of the reserve account, and you would have been, everything would have been nice. But the way it is right now, there's no money changing hands at all. Like, what do they pay you, $1 a year or something like that? And that's the only funds that change hands. And at the end of the day, in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, when that lease expires, then we can look at the removal of the building at that point in time. I just do not see the necessity of holding funds aside, ongoing ad infinitum on this to accomplish nothing, if you will. And so from that perspective, I would be opposed to taking any further reserves, or any reserves for that matter.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Just before Ms. Carlisle wishes to comment, if I may, I'm really a little frustrated here with process. And I recognize that Chair Weiss and Director Main were both absent, unfortunately, from last Tuesday's Committee of the Whole. This topic was discussed. It was debated. It was brought forward. And I think it's unfortunate it didn't come to this committee first. No offense to Director Wallace, because it's good information, good discussion to have. But there was a vote actually taken on this topic. And now here we are discussing it again, back at this committee level, which to me is not appropriate. So if somebody wishes to ask for reconsideration of the recommendation that comes from the Committee of the Whole, certainly we can do that and have the discussion there. But I don't know what motion Director Fraz has intent to bring forward now relating to this, but it has been decided at the Committee of the Whole level. Thank you.
I feel a little bit guilty for not reading those minutes, but it's been a busy week for us as well. Director Frost, do you want to elaborate on where this is going?
Yeah, if I could just respond to that too. While this was discussed at the Committee of the Whole, what ended up happening is something that we've seen before. What ended up happening was something that we've seen as a concern from the regional board, is where people who aren't paying for a service outvote the people who are paying for it. And when it was discussed there, the Nanaimo directors held the balance of the power of the vote, outvoted the Oceanside area. So perhaps it was a missed opportunity that it wasn't deferred to at this time, but that was only upon reflecting on it afterwards. I think this is the more appropriate place to be speaking about arenas in the Oceanside area, and I think the board would probably value having the opinion of the committee here before they make consideration at the board meeting coming up from it. Since it was a Committee of the Whole meeting, and had spoken to staff to see if, is this a place to discuss things, and it seemed like this is an appropriate area, so that's why I wanted to bring it up here. Part of this too is I don't know if the curling club has been reached out to discuss if the demolition of the building as well. So we've made a conversation at the committee level, but perhaps we should be bringing them in. They've made substantial investments into that building, extending the life of it. From my understanding, it also extends the ice use of it too, to accommodate more ice. So if there's a need for more ice, that's one thing they're working towards. And I haven't seen any desire for the lease not to be renewed on the Parksville side of it. So it makes me wonder, is there a desire for the RDN to not renew the lease then when it comes up, since it takes two people to be involved in it? If that's the case, then I could understand a little bit more fully that the responsibility then is to demolish the building, but that would be our own initiative. And so I'm just looking for a little bit more information on this, and I think we are the people that should be putting that recommendation towards the board.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I may. So I agree that it should have been discussed here first. I think that would have been a good venue. And again, no offense to Director Wallace, who simply wanted to bring the topic forward, and quite rightly. I have to disagree respectfully with the notion that the vote at the Committee of the Whole was based on municipalities versus electoral areas, because what I heard from the conversation was a difference in philosophies between putting money aside now for something that we might need later, or waiting to determine later if we should start putting money aside. That's the basis on which I voted, I know that. I still feel that this today is not the venue for this discussion. the recommendation from the Committee of the Whole will go to the board. We can have certainly a renewed debate there. And when it is a financial matter, I'll point out that all directors will be involved in the voting. So that's my response, Chair, and I'm not sure what decision this committee would want to make today.
Excuse me.
Maybe if I could help out a little bit in terms of where this came from. There actually was a report to the board in 2018 in the lease renewal, and in that report, the information we had from the City of Parksville at that point in time was that we had better prepare ourselves to remove the building within 5 years. And that was communicated to us in a number of meetings. So we took a report forward, and I don't know if there was a motion at the City of Parksville, but that's what was communicated to us. So we took that report forward to the RDN board, and we said, we're doing a lease renewal, but we understand that at the end of 5 years, we may be requested to leave. And that was communicated to the curling club. So everyone's aware, and so that report went through the board, and so each year we've been putting it forward in the budget, and it's been either funded or not funded, depending on the board's direction. But I think the best thing we might do is the RDN board might go back and check with the City of Parksville and ask what their position is with regard to the removal of the structure, if they have one, and if they don't, then we have a contract that exists that in 2023 we have an obligation to remove the structure. So I don't want to put pressure on the City of Parksville, but if there's some question, then that would be.
Councillor Main? No, Councillor Main. Look at that. That'll insult. Director Frost and Director McLean.
Just want to respond to a couple of comments there. One being that there was no recommendation that came out of the Committee of the Whole since there was a motion that didn't get passed. So there is not a reconsideration, and there's no recommendation that's coming out of it. It was just a budget item that was being discussed out of there. So with that in mind there too, and I hear what you're saying about it's not a municipality against the other, and that's not exactly what I was suggesting. It's suggesting the fact that they didn't have an opportunity to hear from the Oceanside Service Committee. So if the directors are going to, from Nanaimo, going to be respecting the choices of what happens up in the northern area, they don't have an opportunity to get that view. So they're only making a choice based off their philosophy and not based off the wishes of the area up here. With that in mind, I don't see any reason why not to, and I'd like to put a motion forward, and the motion would be that we delay budgeting and taxing for the demolition of the arena, and it can include until such time that we reach out to and hear back from the City of Parksville and the curling club as well.
I need clarification on this. So it was gone through the, excuse me, it's already gone through the Committee of the Whole, and the decision has been made. And then we're coming here and we're sort of doing a about turn. I'm not sure about the process is all. Can someone explain process for me? I don't want opinions. I want, no, hold on a second. I'm looking for staff.
And that is a motion on the floor there.
No, I'm talking about the Committee of the Whole versus what we decided there. Are we, I see all kinds of hands up. Are we doing the right thing moving forward here on something that, as far as I can tell, has already been decided at a previous full board meeting?
Right, the vote has not reached the board level yet for final.
Okay.
The motion was originally defeated at the Committee of the Whole, but that defeated the motion that now moves up to the board for further consideration. So it could be discussed in more detail at the board level as well.
That's where I'm going with this. Right. So now it's going to go to the board for, and we can have this discussion in earnest with everyone there and voice our concerns. I know that Director Frost is somewhat concerned about, you know, east versus west, north, south, whatever that looks like.
I do have a motion on the floor, so is it able to be seconded and debated here and then voted on? I think that's what the question is at, so there is a motion on the floor.
I'm going to second the motion so we can get through this, because otherwise we're going to be completely out of order. So that's why I'm seconding.
Discussion. Of course, Director Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. And recognizing Director Thorpe's comments, but also as a director representing one of the Oceanside units that would be involved with this. I don't think there's anything at all wrong with, we've had a motion at the Committee of the Whole. The Committee of the Whole puts recommendations forward to the board. This committee meets as the Oceanside Services Committee. We have the opportunity in a meeting duly scheduled and so on to put a recommendation forward to the board also. The board can certainly receive two motions with respect to the same thing, whether one's coming from the Committee of the Whole or whether one's coming from the Oceanside Services one. This was a motion that has been historically there, that we not put funds into this until there is more definitive information going forward on the need to demolish the building. So I certainly do support the fact that that this motion is quite legitimate, and I will be supporting it, that this committee does not support the additional funds in the 2021 for setting funds into reserve for that building demolition.
Director Main.
And this is why we get paid the big bucks, isn't it, for these tough decisions? The reality is there is no motion. The motion was defeated at the last meeting. What goes forward, actually, does it even have to go to the board, even if it is defeated? I'm not sure about that, but at this point in time, there's nothing. It was defeated at the Committee of the Whole, so there is nothing. So that makes it wide open as if it never existed. And if it never existed, we can go back and correct the errors of what happened by bringing it to this committee first and then moving on forward with it. That would be my opinion of it, humble as it may be, that we should, in fact, go forward with this motion.
Director Salter.
Thank you, Chair. And I actually I'll never figure this out. I actually have two things now. And so I will go with the first one, which is, I don't know the procedure on this, and I'm hearing things. I want to hear the actual procedure now going forward, so that we're following process and we're getting this right. So that's the first thing. I need clarification on that before we carry on. And I may or may not have anything to say after that.
The City of Parksville.
Well, thank you then. So we are, as far as process goes, then we're okay moving forward. Great. So I would say that I do support this motion. I do think it should have come here first. And we just, from all that I can see, it was a long night that night. We had a lot on our plate. And I think we just missed this piece. So, and I will be supporting Director Frass's motion.
Director McLean.
Thank you, Chair. As the same as our past Committee of the Whole meeting, I can't support this. I mean, we can have City of Parksville say, yeah, we're never going to demolish the building, and that's fine. You can say that. By the time this agreement expires, none of us sitting at the table might be here. There's going to be a different council, different board. They might make different decisions. So without an amended lease agreement, there's no way I can support not putting money aside for something that's an obligation to our taxpaying citizens. Thank you.
Director Salter.
Thank you. And so I just do want to speak to that because it was my understanding the motion that did not pass was, or actually the motion that was on the floor was that we start taking dollars for the possible demolition of the building. And that was in this year's budget. We never spoke to budgets going forward. We spoke to, 2020 budget. We weren't speaking to budgets going forward. We said the motion was to hold it off for 1 year while we got the information that I believe Director Frass is asking for now. So it was simply not to include it into this budget. However, we would be reviewing that once we had the information that we didn't have the other night. That was my understanding, that motion that I believe it was Director Wallace that brought forward. So this is not going down the road 60 years. It was simply a short period of time here while we got that information. That was my understanding. Am I correct?
Director Wallace, might as well answer.
Might as well chime in here. So the motion at the Committee of the Whole was related to the budget discussions, and it was related to some online feedback that was also received from the Curling Club, and then they reached out to ask if I had actually seen the input that they put into the budget process. And so the only opportunity I had to address the issue, because I didn't have the information, was to delay the taking of the funds for the demolish of the building just as part of the budget discussions at the Committee of the Whole. The motion was defeated, and that's fine. The motion that I put forth was to delay the funds collection to 2021 for the demolish of the building. It was relayed, and why I had put that motion forward, sorry, it's been a long day, was because the Curling Club had informed me that they had purchased a new chiller and that would probably last more than 5 years, and that they hadn't had an opportunity to meet with Qualicum or Parksville yet to figure out where it is they would be curling in 3 years. And so all I was asking for, because it was related to the budget discussion, I only put a motion forward regarding the budget, but that was the background to the motion that I explained. And so I believe what Director Frass has done is maybe filled in the gaps regarding the missing pieces of the Curling Club not having a conversation about when it is they won't have a lease anymore. And I was trying to just attach the funding to the time of the building. We didn't have the answer to the time, how long the building would be standing. I was just looking at the financial plan, looking out over the next couple years, and I didn't understand why we would I understand why we would put money away for asset management. I understand that the building is old. However, the chiller was the reason I brought forth the motion. So I hope that provides some background, and I will be in support of Director Frass's motion.
Director Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, let me make this clear. Whether we start to put money aside this year or next year or 2 years from now is not something that I'm going to lose sleep over. What I will lose sleep over is process, and that is my concern here. So I want to be clear. If Director Frass's motion at this committee is the same as at the Committee of the Whole, which got defeated, then discussing it and voting on it again here is, in my opinion, totally inappropriate. Now, I'm hearing from our legislative experts, thank you for being here, that his motion is different, that it's simply asking for an update from the Curling Club and the City of Parksville on what their plans are. If I am correct in that interpretation, I will happily support it.
The motion does include delaying the budget for taxation for the demolition until that time.
Then if I may, Chair, I would again turn to our legislative personnel to ask if that is appropriate.
So the motion that was defeated.
I'm still struggling with it. Please feel free. I've sort of ignored you so far. I'm still struggling with the process, but it does sound like a different motion. I think in the future, with something like this, I would very much be happy to have some sort of a notice of motion possibly, so we can do some homework prior to getting to here and getting somewhat ransacked. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed is McLean, Thorpe, and Weiss. Motion passes, I'm going to say. Motion to adjourn.
Can I, just before we go, just so that I have a great deal of respect for, I have a great deal of respect for Chair Thorpe's opinions, and so before we get to the to the board meeting, could we get a definitive ruling on what's happened and make sure that just all somebody's got to say is yes, you were fine with that ruling, or no, you weren't, so that we have nothing coming back at us a month from now, if we could. Just a request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to adjourn.
So I didn't call the vote here, and I apologize. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried, thank you.